Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Chat live from the studios of Cannabis Media. I'm the founder of Cannabis Media, Jimmy Young. Today is Wednesday. That means we get to play the role of Professor Weed. That's right. We're going to educate you and talk to educators about the cannabis sativa plant. Who's teaching it? What are they teaching? How are they teaching it? And maybe even the people that are placing those who have been taught in jobs. That's right. We've got a variety of special guests lined up over the next 2 hours. Some old friends, some new friends, and some hope to be some friends at some point. Anyway, we can tell you a little bit about what's going on in the world of cannabis today, some news items that have come across my desk, my inbox, and my emails. And I can also tell you a little bit that we'll have a special appearance by yours truly. I was part of a webinar, and I want to make sure you understand that I was the news reader on the webinar by Emerald Media Group out of New York on cannabis and sex. No, I was not one of the people that they talked to about this. I just did my job, which is read some of the news. And we'll be sharing that with you, I think, in about an hour in one of our little breaks that we take. We will also, of course, be celebrating 420. And I have a little bit of a tease on that, but let's just say we have a special announcement about 420, and that'll be coming up in, I don't know, 15, 18 minutes or so. Let's see, 17 minutes or so. That'll be coming up in a little bit. So lots to get to, but we're going to start right here in the state of Massachusetts, because right when you think that the Cannabis Control Commission is doing the right thing for those who have been most impacted on the war on drugs, the legislature gets involved and says, hold the phone, Steve Hoffman and the rest of your commissioners. We want you to get some more public comments about these new delivery licenses, because I believe they've upset a few dispensary owners about giving a break to those who have been most impacted on the war on drugs, giving them a leg up, if you will, on the competition for those valuable delivery licenses. They'll now open up those public comment period now to the end of November. And yes, on Friday, on the Green Rush, which is at the same time on Friday, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Cannabis Chat, David Rabinovitz will be joining me, and we will be talking about, again, the battle for social equity applicants, the challenges that they face, not only here in Massachusetts, but all over the United States. That includes the mature markets of California and Colorado. So we'll be talking about that on Friday. Now, tomorrow, if you really want to know what's going on in the cannabis industry, I recommend logging on to the Burns and Levinson law firm's website today to get in to see their annual State of the Industry get-together. Tomorrow, Thursday, we do this live, so I can say tomorrow. Of course, if you're seeing this recorded earlier, then perhaps it won't be tomorrow, but it will be available, I'm sure, online. And it is all about the state of the cannabis industry, not only here in Massachusetts, but across those great United States of ours and around the world. Frank Siegel and Scott Moskal head up the cannabis division of Burns and Levinson. They do a great job. And actually, I think this is going to be the first conference that I am not going to be present for, because it's not an in-person conference. It's virtual, like everything else in this world is virtual. And it will be available to you. I believe they've got a $25 fee to get in to watch that webinar, but the interview you definitely want to tune in for is the one that Frank Siegel will be doing with Steve Hoffman, who is the head of the Cannabis Control Commission in Massachusetts. And that commission has done a pretty darn good job, considering they were starting from scratch a few years back. They've now got, I believe, over 70 dispensaries open around Massachusetts right now, and quite a few more in the pipeline, ready to get their provisional licenses, which kind of paves the way for them to commence operations. But even that stage sometimes takes a little bit longer than they expect. So that's what's going on here in the state of Massachusetts. I can tell you about an interesting item that has to do with the international cannabis scene, and it has to do with the United Nations and the World Health Organization, WHO. Now, we all know that cannabis for many, many years has been a controlled substance and still is by federal law. And as we also know that there's plenty of movement towards descheduling cannabis, decriminalizing cannabis, legalizing cannabis, getting people to actually understand what this plant does, how it works with the human body, all based on science and research. And the World Health Organization, they actually were gathering in Austria in early October this month. This was earlier this month. And the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs, this is the World Health Organization's recommended changes, and the U.S. State Department, of course, got involved because they get to pretty much say whatever they want in these things. After all, it is the United Nations, and I'm pretty sure that the United States had something to do with forming that, if I remember my history. Anyway, very interesting things that the UN has to look at, as does the World Health Organization. Now, the U.S. disagreed with 4 of the 6 World Health Organization recommendations, largely because the changes would, and I'm going to read this, introduce legal ambiguities and contradictions that would undermine effective drug control, and at worst, they could result in the exclusion of control of all THC-derived cannabis cultivated for industrial purposes and THC derived from leaves separated from the cannabis plant. This undoubtedly would lead to further cannabis abuse. Now again, you've got to realize for 80 years, the United States government has been basically sharing lies and misinformation with its public about this plant. They've looked at this plant so many times. They have funded so many substance abuse research studies, and they can, over 30,000, by the way, and there's only been about 700 done on opioids. Again, just a comparison there. And sure enough, they've found very little to basically back up the fact that you can abuse cannabis. Of course you can. Okay, but it is in very few cases do people do that. And there are also now cases, and they name these various things that cannabis can lead to. I believe that there's a convulsive disorder that basically makes you throw up, and you can't help but throw up when you take or you're around THC-derived cannabis. So they know that it's not totally not harmful, but in comparison to the amount of people who use it, it's pretty benign. That's right. That's what we know by science and research, not just the opinion of this talk show host, okay? It is still a pretty benign product. However, it can be abused if you don't use it responsibly. And that's what we talk about all the time. And it's one of the reasons why I started Pro Cannabis Media in the first place, is to educate the public about some of the positive effects that this plant has had, and more importantly, tell the stories of the people that have told me that cannabis has saved their life or cannabis has changed their life. And a lot of those comments are coming from people who were addicted on opioids and had to get off of that. And cannabis has emerged as an exit drug now. And I don't even like using the word drug. It's a plant, okay? It's a plant that was put on here by God so that people thousands of years ago needed medicine, and they used derivatives of this plant because God put it on this earth for that purpose. And finally, we're starting to realize that there are benefits to this plant. Now, obviously, the United States government has been involved with Controlled Substances Act, making it a Schedule I drug, putting it right alongside heroin and LSD and ecstasy, and basically saying it has no medicinal purpose. That's kind of been disproven, and also the U.S. government has been proven to be a bit hypocritical about it, because they have already created an FDA-approved drug that's derived from synthetic cannabis, Epidiolex, which helps with epilepsy. And of course, they're they've approved it, they've made some money off it. This is what happens in the United States of America sometimes, is that money dictates research, money dictates politics, money dictates a lot of things, and it can also screw up a lot of things. That being said, there's still a lot of people that have invested a lot of money in this industry because the predictions are in the billions and billions of dollars of growth in this industry over the next 5 years. So, what are we going to do? Well, I know one thing. The UN is the primary driver in crafting or attempting to change global cannabis policy. And of course, these particular meetings that they have, whether they be virtual or they're actually in person in Vienna, Austria, or wherever those World Health Organization and UN people are meeting these days, at least they are talking about doing something internationally about this. And again, CBD is one of the magical cannabinoids that are in the cannabis plant. THC is the intoxicating chemical. It's the one that gets you high or buzzed or stoned or whatever else you want to call the darn thing, okay? It can make you feel good. Or if you just use the CBD products, perhaps you can actually affect the inflammation in your body. Right now, I'm actually taking a tincture that is a 10-to-1 ratio. 10 part CBD, 1 part THC. And I can give Canna Provisions out in Lee, Massachusetts a plug because that's where I found this product and is the first product I found in my medical marijuana career that has that kind of a ratio in it. And it's a tincture, and I take it every morning, and I don't know. I will tell you this, I don't go to work intoxicated, okay? I don't show up here in our studios under the influence of anything, unless, of course, you want to take my blood and you want to see what's in it, but that would be a scary thing. So I don't recommend that, okay? But we definitely are looking for ways to show the benefits of this plant and what benefits people can get from it. Now, a little bit later on the show, let me tell you a little bit about our guests that we have lined up. We've got another person calling in from the Cleveland School of Cannabis. It is Heavenee Chandler, and she's involved with career placement from this organization, Cleveland State Cannabis, which I believe they place something like 70% of the graduates of their program in cannabis jobs, which is fantastic. And in fact, there's a whole recruitment industry out there now in the cannabis space. I can name probably a half dozen companies. Flower Hire is one of them. They're involved with LeafWire, which is kind of a LinkedIn for those in the cannabis business. And there are plenty of jobs emerging in this cannabis space. Okay, yes, once again, cannabis and jobs. Yes, those two words can actually be linked together, despite the fact that every time one side of the aisle in Washington, D.C. brings up cannabis reform as part of the COVID relief bill, and the other side of the aisle says there's more mentions of cannabis in this COVID relief than there is jobs. Hello, you guys on the other side of the aisle, cannabis reform will lead to more jobs. And it will also open up the banking industry to the cannabis industry. That, to me, is something that you, on the other side of the aisle, I think pretty much people know which side I lean to, although when you're on camera, sometimes it's this way, but that's okay. Bottom line is we're all Americans here. We're supposed to actually come to some kind of moderation, some kind of agreement. That's what government's about. We certainly hope that will happen. Now, that means that you out there have to vote, because that is the most important thing you can do to affect change in this country. Do not think that your vote doesn't count. It does. In fact, if my memory serves me right, despite all the cannabis that I have in there, or have had in there, 68 million people have already voted in the presidential election by mail. That's, I believe, almost half the amount of voters who voted in the last election. So you've already got almost half the people that have cast their votes already already in place, ready to go, ready to be counted, which, as we know, probably won't happen until Tuesday, November 3rd, but that's only next week. And yes, you are going to have to suffer through another weekend of those political ads. I'm sorry, I have nothing to do with those political ads. If I had my way, I would be able to filter out those political ads because I've already voted. But technology just hasn't come up that way just yet, let's just say. All right, so we've got Heavenee Chandler from the Cleveland School of Cannabis coming up at the bottom of this hour. At the top of the next hour, we've got an old friend. She's the executive director of the Elevate Northeast group. Her name is Beth Waterfall. She's involved with curriculum at the Holyoke Community College. She is one of the most respected people in this industry in Massachusetts because of her passion for it, her education, and her ability to create learning content. And we'll find out what Elevate Northeast is up to and what Beth Waterfall is all up to as well at the top of the next hour. And then we also have at 5:30, which is a little over an hour from now, Emma Chasen from Oregon. So yes, indeed, we'll be going from cannabis coast to coast with a stop in Cleveland along the way, because both sides of this coast now are going to be pro-cannabis, because all indications are that New Jersey is going to be the next state that will vote in adult use legalization of cannabis on November 3rd. Polling, I believe, is 3-1 in favor. I also saw a recent news note that came across that the pro-cannabis initiatives in the various states where these questions are on the ballot, and there's 5 states that have this question on the ballot, are outspending the anti-cannabis, the prohibitionists, by a count of something like 3-1. Now, again, he or she who spends the most money wins? Is that really what our political system has come down to? Unfortunately, that's a fact and a reality of our times. That's all I got to say about that. So, those are our 3 guests. We got Emma Chasen. We've got time to take a break almost, because now it is 4:20. Yes, it is amazing, and I'm able to talk to myself for about 20 minutes every time I start this show. Let me tell you a little about 420, and then I'll explain afterwards what's going on with 420 moving forward. The Waldos. Have you ever heard of the Waldos? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you've heard about this 420 code. It's the time where those in the cannabis industry decide that's the good time to go out and catch a buzz. It all started with a group of high schoolers in San Rafael, California. They called themselves the Waldos, and they would meet at 4:20 in the afternoon to catch a buzz at the Louis Pasteur statue. That is, until law enforcement picked up on the fact that at every afternoon at 4:20 there were a bunch of kids consuming cannabis in a public place. That was a no-no, and it still is a no-no actually in many laws, even in legal states like here in Massachusetts. However, the law enforcement people were real quick to pick up on that code, and they started using 420 happening at the corner of Main and Broad Street. Check it out. So it always was code for them, again, public consumption of cannabis. So that's why we pause at 420. I tie it back to my own personal use because in 1971, that coincides with my first taste of the plant when I was an 8th grader, and I was extremely ADHD as opposed to how I am now. Anyway, what was serving as the 420 code for us here in New England, it was a song called Shanty. It was written by Jonathan Edwards, a folk rock singer from New Hampshire. And every time we heard the song Shanty, well, you know, we did like the Waldos did, because that's what you did. In the meantime, we celebrate it by sharing Shanty with our audience, and we'll be back after Jonathan Edwards plays at a radio station in New Hampshire, his native state of New Hampshire, and this is one of my favorite songs.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, you know, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car, I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God, John.
Special thanks to our friends at WSCA Radio out in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and Jonathan Edwards, of course, the legendary Jonathan Edwards. Now, let me tell you this story about what's going to happen in 420. It looks like we do have a sponsor for our 420 breaks. And the reason why I've offered this woman and her company this sponsorship is because she was a fan of Jonathan Edwards, and she's the first person I've actually talked to about it that remembered Jonathan Edwards. And the best part is she's much, much younger than me, almost 30 years younger than me. Okay, so anyway, the name of the company is arterypay.com, A-R-T-E-R-Y, arterypay, P-A-Y.com. And their elevator pitch is simple. It's Venmo for cannabis. I know anybody who understands Venmo certainly understands what that means, and it means that you can pretty much pay for cannabis through your phone. That's kind of how it works. It's going to be tied to an account somewhere, and somewhere there'll be a debit going on, because we all know that it's still not a charge card, but it's a very cool idea. And Ashley Elsner is the CEO and founder of this company. I'm interviewing her tomorrow, and that will be my special In the Weeds for next week. Okay, so for those of you who follow this show and know, every weekend I tend to put together some kind of an interesting promo that promotes the people I talk to on In the Weeds. It's a Venmo for weed. Well, you can figure it out, okay? That's probably what the promo is going to be all about coming up this weekend. But more importantly, you'll be able to listen and to watch that interview Monday at 6 p.m. following our live stream, our regular Medicinal Monday show. And then we'll go into the first run of the In the Weeds. Similarly to what we do on Friday with our Weed Talk News, we do a weekly Weed Talk news show, and with Kurt Dalton from Cannabis.net, and we release that for the first time at 6 o'clock on Fridays. Okay, so I think that gives you enough promotional stuff, and you can see why we're so excited to actually have another supporter for our cause here at Pro Cannabis Media. And if you are interested in becoming an expert in our expert club, if you think that you're an expert in the cannabis industry in some aspect, and it doesn't have to be whether you are a grower or a dispensary owner or a licensee holder or a container company or a lawyer or an accountant, like Account Buds, right? Yes, we can figure out a way to work with you, and we've got a special offer for experts in the cannabis industry. You can find me at info@procannabismedia.com and contact me there. Or you can actually go into our little chat room, and I've got the chat room. I can actually read it. It's like right there off camera, although I know Dan well enough to know he'll probably punch it up and show you where it is. No, he's not. He's shaking his head. I can see that peripherally, okay? Anyway, it's right there, so if you want to chat, you can certainly chat in our chat room. And maybe we'll throw out a quiz question. Here's a simple quiz question, okay? I want you to tell me what is a terpene and name a terpene that is in the cannabis plant or in some cannabis plants. What are those terpenes? What the heck do they do? And name one, and I'll give you a shout out on our chat board if you chime in. But right now, I'm going to go to our first guest of the day, and her name is Heavenee Chandler, and she's with our friends at the Cleveland School of Cannabis out of Ohio. Hello, Heavenee. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, actually, even though it's been a rainy, dreary, cold, almost November day. You know, it's been a good day. We've had a lot of exciting things happen, and it always is that way here at Pro Cannabis Media. But let's tell the people a little bit about yourself. Let's talk about the role that you're playing at Cleveland School of Cannabis. We'll start with that. What exactly do you do with our friends at CSC?
I am the newest addition to the CSC crew down in Columbus. We actually have 2 branches. We operate out of Cleveland, and we just added my position to Columbus. I am the career service representative. I work directly with our career director, Yoshiko Tespanos, and together we operate and connect through the different networks involving cannabis, dispensaries, cultivation facilities, processing facilities all over the Ohio market. So my particular goal is to work with students on resume building, cover letter crafting, interview questions 101, mock interviewing, and being that connection between the student and the business professional.
That's a great thing, and what a great thing to do for a profession too. I know a lot of people in that recruitment world, if you will, or career placement world, and very valuable position. A lot of intrinsic rewards when you're helping people actually get jobs. And aren't there more jobs now in cannabis than ever before, Heavenee?
Oh yes, the market's only going to grow and expand. I expect it to look so different a year from now. I keep emphasizing to the students to remain optimistic. The cannabis boom is not going to go away. The job market is only going to get more specific, whether you want to do accounting, book balancing, or you want to be a manager, or you want to be in the medical aspect, you want to be a consultant, a processor, it's all there.
Absolutely. And you're working with young people. And here's the thing about the Cleveland School of Cannabis. I'm pretty sure, after talking with a lot of people there, it's not your typical 18-year-old to 22-year-old, which is kind of the prime spot for secondary education after high school. You really have all ages and all people from different backgrounds, correct?
Oh, absolutely. We have 18-year-olds fresh out of high school. We have professionals who've been in the game for 20 years. We have advocates who are passionate about this. We have, people who work at banks, people with masters, PhDs, all under this umbrella of coming here to further their cannabis education.
It's pretty amazing to me what's gone on and what's happened in this world. And over the last, let's make it 10 years. We've moved very fast in the last few years, but over the last 10 years, we've gone from total prohibition in most states to 11 full legal states now have adult use cannabis. 5 more states have it on their ballot questions on Tuesday, and all indications are most of them they believe will pass. It's the Mississippi one that's the biggest question mark and the closest one, I believe, in pre-polling, if you believe all that stuff. What part of the industry do you find to have the most upside as far as number of jobs? Is it in the grow? Is it in the operations end of things for dispensaries? Is it in compliance? What part of the industry do you see the biggest expansion in jobs?
Well, once everything is made legal on a recreational level, I really feel like dispensaries are going to be the market to have, just because you can do a lot out of that, right? You can do sales, you can do marketing, and then you can do management placement. And then from there, you can branch off. You could be an operation that goes on to have a facility under your belt. So I feel like if you're really serious about this profession, the next 5 years, dispensaries are going to be the next, the most expansive, in my opinion, because you can just lead from owning your dispensary, getting your own cultivation facility, and branding yourself. And that's where it's going to go. Currently, though, the medicinal aspect of cannabis, if you want to be a consultant, that is always going to have a need. So if it's going to be a medical consultant or operations, those are going to be your main two.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Now, can I ask you a question about the CSC graduate? How would you differentiate, how would you describe a CSC graduate compared to other either online certificate courses or even some of these courses that are being given at universities and colleges all over the country? What distinguishes a CSC graduate?
It'd be the curriculum. 10 years ago, schools like this were not even thought of. Curriculum like this did not exist. And as we know, the industry is always changing. And I think CSC has done a fantastic job of making sure that all those bases are covered. Your average CSC student is walking out with an umbrella under their belt. They know their cannabis laws and policies. They know how to cook with cannabis. They know their extraction process. That's going to set them apart from a lot of these already established professionals. They are still not able to necessarily compete when it comes to the cannabis knowledge. Something I noticed stepping back into Ohio, although you have a lot of people that have a lot of experience and they do have a nice understanding, they still lack the actual experience when it comes to cannabis and the understanding of what all that entails. The CSC student upon graduation is ready to enter the job market. They have covered that umbrella and they have an advantage of working with industry professionals in the field. So they have a network already upon graduation to work with, and they've been trained by some of the top professionals in Ohio. So I think the CSC graduate is really set up for success from jump upon graduation. It's the curriculum and it's the network that they have that will really give them that advantage.
Yeah, I think it was something like 160 hours of coursework too. That just boggles the mind that there's that much out there to learn, and I still maintain we're scratching the surface when it comes to curriculum because, as you know, they discover new cannabinoids in this plant almost every month now all over the world, and it's starting to be researched. In fact, I think the research angle of cannabis is going to have the most expansive growth, because right now you've got the University of Mississippi for the most part, and now, you know, I'm hoping things move in the right direction. They open up research and we can find out more and more and more about some of the benefits of this plant. Let me ask you a question about the young people that you obviously mentor and talk with, and the graduates that come to you. And you mentioned Interview 101. If I was a graduate of CSC and I came into your course or under your guidance, what would be a suggestion you give me to make myself a hireable person in the industry? You'd probably say there's no hope. I know. You can say it. It's okay.
I think it's all about the expectations that you set for yourself, right? Realistically, where do you see yourself in this industry? And realistically, what speaks to you based on your qualifications? So a lot of the time when a student has completed their coursework and they're coming to me and we have that dialogue, it's always going to be, okay, so how did you utilize your time while you were here? What relationships did you build up with your professors? Do you have a letter of recommendation from any of these instructors that will speak on your behalf to your attendance, your knowledge, and your work ethic? Also, coming into this industry, it'll be a little challenging on entry level. So what do you realistically want to set for yourself, and where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? So I think having that already set in an action plan really sets you apart from the other students. So, for example, we're actually broken down into different segments in our school. You have our executive program, which covers the whole field: operations, medical, cooking, the whole 9 yards. Then you have specifics: industrial hemp majors, horticulture majors, dispensary operation majors. So depending on what you are interested in and what you want to do, I mentor and build them around that. So if you've done business operations, realistically, what are you looking for? Do you want to be a patient consultant? Do you want to be a manager? Are you looking to general manage? Do you want to oversee a processing facility? And if so, what are the steps we can take to make sure that you can compete at that level?
Gotcha. And I'm guessing that's also part of your core curriculum at the patient navigation course that you teach, yes? Mm-hmm. Was I right? Am I assuming the right thing?
Patient navigation is interesting because the class itself is essentially the fundamentals of understanding medical cannabis.
Okay.
It's essentially practical advice on how to use, recommend, and understand medical cannabis from a clinical, but also a consumer point of view. So for individuals who are going to step into dispensaries, who are going to step into medical offices, this is a prime class for them.
Gotcha. And you know what? I'm looking at your bio, and I understand you went to the UCLA Extension in their TESOL program. TESOL is a foreign acronym to me. Can you explain to me what that program's all about at UCLA?
Yes. So at UCLA, they have an extension program, and so you can specialize in different areas. And TESOL is just an umbrella term for teaching English to non-native speakers, or essentially you have TEFL, and it's all just an umbrella term for teaching English to speakers of other languages.
Got it. Do you speak any other languages?
I speak a bit of Spanish. I did a little stint in Mexico for about 6-7 months a few years ago, and I actually have been taking Spanish lessons since then. I would love to be able to incorporate that in my day-to-day, so that's a long-term goal. So currently, I before COVID, I was assistant teaching and going into classrooms and participating in that. It's not necessarily Spanish speakers, it's non-native English speakers.
And, you know, I know Mexico, actually, I think I saw a news note about that. They're actually voting on legalization before the end of this month. I know they've been talking about it for a long time in Mexico. And I would think that that country, of all the countries in North America, especially you've got Canada legal, United States, probably maybe we'll go to decriminalization over the next few months. I don't want to jinx anything. And then you would think Mexico would have to follow that because they're part of the North American peninsula anyway. So do you see Mexico as again, another huge nation that will legitimize and get rid of the stigma that has been following this plant for decades and generations?
As long as all goes according to plan, I think they will be actually the next country to jump aboard. They, like the United States, had faced such a propaganda smear about cannabis there, and they've taken some leaps and bounds to really turn that around. I mean, arguably, they were some of the first trailblazers as well when it came to the plant. So just like us, this proposal would allow, adults 18 and older to possess and cultivate marijuana. And I really feel like they're going to be the next trailblazers in that. The market's huge. And I believe as far as medicinal uses are concerned, that, this is an opportunity for them and for us to partner together on that. I believe the marijuana reform legislation, it's going to, I think COVID-19 has kind of derailed these negotiations a bit, but we should see some leeway in the next year.
Yeah, let's hope something good comes out of this COVID world. I will say this, the use of Zoom that has increased exponentially over the last 6 or 7 months has made my job as an interviewer, talk show host, news gatherer a little easier, because you don't have to get everybody to come into your studio. I mean, if I wanted to have you in my studio, you'd have to hop on a plane, then you'd have to get out to, outside of Boston just to get to the studio. This way, we just call you up, you log in, you click, and there you are. So in a lot of ways, we've adapted to the COVID world and tried to make it work for us. What's been the biggest effect for CSC as far as enrollment goes, or even delivering the curriculum? I'm guessing everything's online now, or have we opened up any hybrid learning on campus?
Honestly, CSC has adapted pretty streamlined. We already had a lot of classes online, so we just adapted. And just like you said, hybrid. We have students who take sometimes the majority of their classes online and might come to campus for one class throughout the week. We have some students who come diligently still to site on campus, and we have a plethora of online students. It's been actually very, very seamless and streamlined. And just like you said, I find that probably the instructors and the students find this a bit easier to do. And the generation we work within, working online and computers and emailing, it's almost second nature at this point. So for the students, it was pretty streamlined.
Yeah, and yet I also know that the college experience of being on a campus is, to be honest, I think even half the amount of learning that you do is the growth that you learn as a human between ages 18 and 22, let's just say. And then, of course, trying to balance that school and fun element that is part of the socialization process of college as well. It's always a challenge, but that is part of it, I guess. What do you see? What do you think the future holds here? I mean, first of all, let's hope and pray that we get a vaccine, that we're able to actually socialize again, that we're actually able to have classrooms filled with people again, stadiums filled with people again, theaters filled with people again. How many students do you have just from like your Ohio area versus out of state who have found out about your program and have, enrolled online?
I'd say about 80%. I'd say about 90% of our students are here from the Ohio area. The other 10% come from Texas, Maryland, Indiana, Pennsylvania. And that's been pretty streamlined just because they're online. But as we grow, we're finding that more students are getting interested. So to go back to what you said before, that is a challenge, is how do we now adjust to the growing numbers when we have to actually limit the capacity?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're one of the few schools that actually has a working campus. So I know that that's been a little frustrating for the powers that be at CSC, but obviously you've adapted pretty well to that online thing. When it comes to socialization, you know, human nature is when we see people, we make eye contact, we shake their hands. If we know them well enough or we haven't seen them for a while, we embrace with a hug. And now COVID has completely turned that to opposite. And yet you still have to do interviews with people in a Zoom environment, I'm guessing. Do you work with your students and your potential employees on how to interview through Zoom?
Yes, one of the I kind of do both, right? Because there's some employers that will still do face-to-face, but as we navigate safely through COVID, online is just the way to do it, and Zoom has been such an essential tool. So what I do is we just sit down with each other, and it's more about the questions being asked. I found from feedback from students that it's actually more comfortable for them to be in their own space. And we prep, you can actually prep your questions in advance, right? You can write them out, you can go over them, and you can have them there with you, as opposed to at the face-to-face interview, you might not have that extra aid with you. So some of the things I go over is, well, what are the students actually anxious about, right? What are they actually nervous about going into these interviews? And a lot of the time, it is actually the face-to-face, the pressure of performance. So when they have that wall that Zoom kind of provides, it gives them an extra bit of leeway to feel comfortable. So prepping the students for these interviews, I always encourage them to go ahead and write notes down, write out questions, write out your responses, practice how you're going to respond in the mirror, you know, go on your IG videos and practice a few times. And when you're ready, come see me for a final one and we'll do it over Zoom to see how you do.
Right. And one of the things that I've worked with young people for a long time. I'm an adjunct instructor at a variety of colleges in the Boston area. And I do teach basic communication skills to young people because I really do believe that the group that is coming out of high school now, junior high school now, they've grown up with computers, they've grown up with smartphones. They have not had the opportunity to do face-to-face communication a lot. And the camera is not a face, but it's really an eye. And I try to explain to people who are afraid of the camera or uncomfortable being on camera that the camera is just an inanimate object. So I use a plastic bottle and I say, let's have you talk to this plastic bottle. And they talk to the plastic bottle as if it's a human being. And they're not threatened by it in any way because after all, we all know, wink, wink, it's a plastic bottle, but it could also be a camera. So that trying to get them to understand that if you make eye contact with that plastic bottle and you can make eye contact with the camera lens, which I can see right now, it's as if I am looking directly at you or at the audience. And I use the staring game. Do you remember the staring game from kindergarten?
Staring contest, go.
Staring contest, you know, where it's like, who's going to break eye contact first? And then I'll hold a rope or a wire up between us and hold your nose. And as soon as you break eye contact, you drop the wire. And sure enough, they understand, oh, that's the connection to a human or the connection to the person asking me the question. And it's a sign of respect to make eye contact. And then I use that mental thought, you know, in golf you call them swing thoughts, but in reality it's that connecting device, and your eyes are the ones that are the communicator to others. And I've always found that to be kind of a good thing to pass along, not just to, you know, middle school kids or high school kids or early college kids, but even some adults out there that are just uncomfortable in their own skin or they're uncomfortable being on camera. Sometimes I find that helps break the ice, get them to relax a little bit, and get them to focus on the person they're actually talking to on the other side of that computer or that little light that you're staring at right now, Heavenee, right? Isn't that the idea, is to make that eye contact? And do you talk to them about when you're on a Zoom call? I always suggest to people that they bring their laptop up so that the camera is at eye level. Because sometimes if you're in a situation where you're looking down at someone on camera or looking up at them on camera, that too can be a sign of just not insecurity, but just not a lot of self-confidence. And those are little tidbits that I like to share with others who are influencing young people. And I don't know if you'll take any of that and learn from that and share that with any of your kids, but you're more than welcome to do that.
Of course. I think some of the things working with me, they get a sense of comfortability, but I'm like, I'm not the employer though. You're going to have to make sure you establish that same connection and that same confidence right here and carry it to your interview. Some students I find are incredibly comfortable behind the screen and utilizing Zoom. And then just like you said, some have a hard time forming that eye contact. So one of the things that will set you apart from other candidates will be that eye contact, will be that confidence on screen. So I do like to hold a mock Zoom interview with them just to see how they do and give them a bit of feedback.
You know, and that is experiential learning, right? You learn by experience. So you're trying to recreate the interview room and you're giving them that opportunity. Experiential learning is a great way to learn. And it is the way I think I learned the most, is learning by doing something. And to this day, as much as I dislike technology and get frustrated by it, the only way I learn is by doing that exercise over and over again, or getting used to going online to that new piece of software, that CRM, that customer retainer management system that we're now learning and have to learn how to use. And there's only one way to learn it, is to just use it. And you know, that experiential learning. Is there a lot of experiential learning type of teaching going on at Cleveland School of Cannabis?
The curriculum will be a combination of both. A lot of it will be interactive with each other. And at least when it comes to my course, it doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room. But I try to introduce working exercises. For example, in the patient navigation class, I'm going to call it a bit of role playing, where I take on the role as the patient, and I will have them stand up and actually interact and consult with me as if I was a stranger or a consumer at the dispensary. And we're going to offer each other feedback off of that as a collective group. And each student will get the opportunity to do that and get the feedback for that. And you couple that with, you know, tests, exams, and multimedia. So for the student who actually learns better with visuals, we'll make sure to incorporate that. And just like you said, the interactive learning, we try to incorporate that. Each class will be different. Cooking with cannabis is pretty straightforward with the hands-on activities. Cannabis law and policies, maybe not as much.
Absolutely not. And Lord knows there's plenty of politics and policy out there. Well, Heavenee Chandler, dare I use this play on words? You've been heavenly as far as an interview goes. How many times have you heard that in your life, right?
I never get tired of hearing it, Jimmy. You've been divine.
Well, thank you. And by the way, I get the whole, you know, old youngy stuff all the time too. It's just the nature of the beast, I guess. But thank you so much. I enjoy so much talking to everybody at Cleveland School of Cannabis. Please send my regards along, and we look forward to the contributions down the road. So thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you so much for the time. Good night, everyone.
Good night. There you go. It's bedtime for a lot of people. No, it's not. It's not even 5 o'clock Eastern time, and that's where when we're going to be talking with Beth Waterfall from Elevate Northeast. But before we go there, it was a week ago yesterday that I was asked to deliver a news report for the Emerald Media Group. And the Emerald Media Group is out of New York City. We work with them in a nice capacity. I'm a big fan of their founder, Christina DiGiovanni. And Jill Cohen hosts their monthly webinar series that they're doing. And they always pick a subject, and then they have experts on from that subject. Now, I'm not going to play the whole webinar for you, but we will be playing it on Pro Cannabis Media social media outlets in the next couple of days, I'm pretty sure. But I did have this report, and this particular subject was, the webinar was cannabis and sex, and they had sex experts, and it was a really interesting webinar to listen to. I don't think my news was that interesting, but because it's my news, I'm going to share it with you, and we'll be back on the other side after this little flashback to that webinar.
Next up is our industry news by Jimmy Young, founder of Pro Cannabis News, and then a word from our Emerald CEO, Christina DeGiovanni. Jimmy?
Hey, thank you very much, Jill. Appreciate it. I am Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and I'm here with a few news items. We'll call it foreplay for today's webinar. In case you don't know, we produce 5 shows on the cannabis industry, including 6 hours now every week of live Cannabis Chat on our new Twitch channel. Now, some people think I'm crazy to do this, but as a former sportscaster in New England, I embrace the craziness and ask you that you check us out on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern on twitch.tv, Pro Cannabis Media. Now, the news headlines from the past month and this past week. 2 states have opened up their medical marijuana operations, Missouri and Virginia. That brings the total of 35 states that now have a medicinal marijuana program in the United States. Now, Vermont became the first state in the country to legalize adult use of cannabis through the legislative process instead of the ballot box. And just in case you hadn't heard, there's a pretty big election coming up in 2 weeks, and there's definitely a pro-cannabis ticket and an anti-cannabis platform. No matter which side, however, that you might prefer, we ask you all who are eligible to please vote and exercise that right. Now, there are 5 states who will be deciding their adult use legalization future. One is New Jersey, where recent polling has that initiative passing by a 3-to-1 margin. Other states are South Dakota, Mississippi, Arizona, and Montana. Now, a current POTUS appointed federal prosecutor named Kurt Alme from Montana is now urging his state to consider the risks of legalizing cannabis in Montana. He brings up many of the old standby arguments by prohibitionists, such as the potential for increased car accidents and children harmed by the potentials of using cannabis as a gateway to harder drugs. Now, all of these age-old arguments have been refuted by science, research, and the experiences of Colorado and Washington State. Meanwhile, a top advisor to New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says legalization of adult use cannabis will once again be introduced to the state budget in January of 2021. The goal is to have an adult use cannabis reform program ready to go by April of 2021. Now, in some international cannabis news, results are still being tabulated in New Zealand, where that country voted on legalization over the past weekend. In Europe, however, Italy has recently classified CBD as a narcotic. Now, there's a bit of an issue in that country because a member of the Agriculture Ministry allows hemp for extraction uses and classifies that plant as an agricultural product, not a drug. On top of this confusion is the fact that the drug Epidiolex for epilepsy is coming into Italy. So the USA isn't the only country still trying to figure out the benefits of the plant medicine and who's in charge of it. One more story to share with you, and it's about the arrest rate for cannabis offenses in the United States. Yes, they decreased year over year from 2018 to 2019. However, there were still 565,602 arrests for cannabis last year, with just over 500,000 of those arrests for cannabis possession. Amazingly, those arrests were more than the 495,871 arrested for violent crimes last year. Police continue to target people of color for a disproportionate percentage of those arrests. It's a whole new world of weed out there, everybody, but we still have a long way to go. For the Emerald Media Group, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. I love your news reports. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I am very excited for this panel that we have today that discusses sex and cannabis.
All right, welcome back to Cannabis Chat for a Wednesday afternoon. We call it Professor Weed Wednesdays because we like to talk with educators, people who are out not only in the community but all over the world teaching cannabis to others. And Lord knows there's lots of education and lots to be taught to different people. One person who is involved with writing curriculum and also sharing her knowledge with everyone in the New England area is Beth Waterfall, and she's with Elevate. Now it's Elevate Northeast, correct?
Correct.
See, I first thought it was New England, but I know NE for you means Northeast. So Beth Waterfall, thank you so much for joining us. And we were talking, in the break there during the break, how much we miss the socialization aspect of the emergence of the cannabis industry. I mean, NECAN specifically, New England Cannabis Convention, a special place in my heart because that's where I started doing my podcast. They've had to postpone since March 13th, and they keep trying to do the webinars and it's really just not the same, is it, Beth?
Yeah, absolutely. And NECAN was actually my first gig in cannabis 5 years ago. I reached out to Mark Shepard is the president of NECAN. I attended their first event, their first cannabis convention in Boston. And after that event, I was like, oh my God, my life can totally change now with the people that I've met and the information I've learned here. And I wanted to get involved, and I had some skills and whatnot to contribute. So I contacted Mark and I said, hey, I do marketing and events, not in cannabis, but I'm looking to get in here. And he gave me my first job writing some of their blogs. And then to this day, I'm helping, I still do the programming. So yeah, it's been tough, looking at the dates and making those decisions, like, will May be a thing? Will July be a thing? It's hard. But, like everybody, we've had to just pivot and just kind of, we're all in this together. So, but luckily people have been pretty supportive, and we had a pretty good turnout for that NECAN online event last month. But there's a event in person actually for NECAN this weekend. It's going to be small due to COVID restrictions, but up in Portland, Maine.
I knew it. It's outside. Yeah. I love how they call it the Portland Sports Center. It's the Expo, okay? Because yours truly broadcast a USSR, a Soviet Union, USA dual wrestling meet from the Expo in 1986.
Did it have the turf on the floor in there then?
No, they did not have the turf on the floor. Said they put, wrestling mats down on top of the basketball court. But, Portland, Maine is where I cut my broadcast teeth for 11 years, working for the CBS affiliate. And I still have dear friends up there. And in fact, John Jennings, who's the city manager up there, is an old friend from his days when he was assistant coach of the Boston Celtics.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I still go up to Portland. It's always
I love it there.
A place I can go and feel like it's my second home. That being said, I also was at NECAN Portland and met some very cool people there. So let's go back to that question about recreating the socialization and the challenges of that from a marketing perspective and also from an operations perspective. I know the lineups that are being put up and putting out there on webinars are outstanding speakers. The quality of the content is great, but what's missing, you can't walk the aisles and then go to breakout sessions and all that. But are you finding that the response of the people that are watching and taking part is equal to the similar response outside of that actual human interaction?
People miss the human interaction. And so in addition to working with NECAN, I work with clients. I do consulting with a bunch of different clients, all in cannabis. And then I also, like you mentioned, run Elevate Northeast. And so there's events and, the desire and the need really to connect with people in all those roles. People absolutely are missing the networking. And we've seen some interesting things pop up. Planning kind of a social event for Elevate for the end of the year. And we're looking at things like virtual karaoke, virtual trivia. There's apps, one called the Icebreaker, where everybody signs on and it breaks you up into a room where you're basically stuck with one person for 5 minutes, and it goes by so fast. And the first time I did it, I was like, I'm going to hate this. Like, what if I get stuck with somebody, like they're going to be, I don't know, we're going to be speaking different languages. But I thought it was really, really effective, and made some good connections. People do follow up. but it just really puts it on people to take advantage of the tools that we do have. So I'm a big fan of not everything needs to be a Zoom call, but if you meet somebody, you can look at who's attending an event. Often there's some sort of like a sidebar where it's showing who's in the room with you, and there's chat functions. You can reach out to them. You can do some quick Googling on the side and see what they're all about and see if it's somebody you want to connect with. So it's making lemonade out of the lemons that we have. And people, for the most part, I hope you've seen it too, Jimmy. People are kind of patient, and just kind of like, what, this is our new normal, at least for now. So luckily I haven't had any sort of really negative experience going virtual with anybody that I know of. No really horrible negative feedback. So
let me ask you a question. The actual program and the speakers and some of the panels, right, that are still available, where are those files? Is that something that's on demand? Do you have to pay to get access to them once the event is over? What are the organizers doing with all that content that they've created and certainly given an opportunity to those who pay to get into it at the first time in? But what's happening with all the old, I would call it, file footage?
Yeah, all those recordings. So it depends. And if you're going to do a bunch of videos, that just makes your whole process and your expenses more complex. You're going to need somebody that can edit the videos, post the videos. You're going to need somewhere to host to keep the videos online and make them accessible to folks. So some event organizers are investing in that type of extra technology and making recordings available, which I think is great because not everybody's able or available to attend something live. But other events, particularly those that are lower ticket prices, it's harder to do recordings just because the expense involved for the actual event producers to host everything. And so I've seen a mix of that, but I personally like it when there's a recording and I can go back in and self-serve and save what I like. But for the event planner, it's always, whether we're going virtual or we're in person, it's always weighing, because we don't know how many people are going to show up. We don't know there's no guarantee that people are going to buy tickets. So there are some hard decisions made early on about, what you're going to put out to bring people in. So there's all sorts of platforms. And I've seen like the big Emerge conference where it was like a virtual expo hall, and you would get an avatar, and it was kind of weird because I got in and I had my little avatar and I'm walking around the expo hall, and I start seeing all these other women with the same exact outfits. Like they look exactly like me. So that was a little awkward. And I couldn't figure out how to change my outfit, but I was like, all right, this is weird.
But it's a great icebreaker to get to say, hey, I have that same outfit in my closet in virtual world, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or like in People magazine, who wore it better?
That's right. Who wore it better? Absolutely. Let's talk about, you're involved with the Holyoke Community College, yes?
Yeah. So
tell me about it. Tell me about what Holyoke, I know a little bit about it, but certainly enlighten some of the people that might be watching that don't understand that there's actually available courses that you can take in the Massachusetts Community College family. Yeah,
there's so many different, it seems like, obviously as the years have come on, legitimate colleges, University of Maryland is doing a medical program, but for up here in Massachusetts, last year, the group C3RN, they had started a relationship with Holyoke Community College, and they did in-person core curriculum training at the college last year and had full plans to do that. Along comes COVID. Unfortunately, C3RN closed part of its business, and we weren't going to bring people into classes, so into a classroom anymore. It just wasn't really an option. We had no idea, are we going to be back in class in September? So where C3RN wasn't able to continue this, Elevate stepped in with C3RN support and introduction and all that. So we took over and, really just carrying the torch of the spark that was lit by C3RN. And obviously made it a virtual program. And through that, obviously, virtual makes it a little bit more accessible to people. So we were able to double the numbers of the people that attended last year. So that was great.
Good.
And that's been good for bringing in speakers too, bringing in the guest speakers and lecturers. We're not so confined by geography anymore. Right. In the program, while it's the Holyoke Community College, we're talking about Massachusetts, getting people prepared to work in the Massachusetts industry specifically. Certainly there's people in neighboring states or other states that could learn a lot here, but really we launched things a couple of weeks ago with a core curriculum weekend-long program on a platform that the college uses out of their Cannabis Education Center. And Kara Crabb-Burnham, who's the director of education for Elevate Northeast, she really led this and did an amazing job. 2 full days of programming with 4 guest speakers. We got some great feedback. And from that program, all the participants, they can now go to employers, with the knowledge that they've gotten and a little bit of perspective about history and how we plant science, a lot of that basic stuff that I think is so critical for anybody to be able to speak knowledgeably with customers, with other people, regardless of what your role is. Learning particularly some of that history stuff gives you an important perspective about some of the responsibility that I think we all carry in this industry to right some of the wrongs that have come on us in cannabis prohibition over the past 80 or so years. So giving people that perspective, and then the folks that attended that week-long program, they can go do whatever they want with that now, but they also are basically qualified for one of 4 educational tracks that will occur next year, starting in the spring: patient services, cultivation, laboratory, and processing. I think those are them, but 4 different tracks. Kara knows it all. But yeah, it's you get a certificate of completion, and well, there are a lot of schools and programs out there to learn. There isn't one. It's not like you have a bachelor's degree and you can go and that's a requirement when you apply for a job. The training and the options are pretty different and varied state to state and even part of state. There's online only type programs. But we think that this program really could help differentiate people as they go explore different areas of the cannabis industry. So happy to be a part of it. It's exciting.
Yeah, well, and by the way, feel free to use us and use me. You mentioned your director of education at Elevate Northeast.
Kara,
Open invite to all directors of education out there in the cannabis space. We do have a studio that you can socially distance and stay 6 to 10 feet apart. Let's just say we've had a few guests in here, which is great. So an open invite, and any time I can help the Elevate Northeast group, I'm more than willing to do that.
Thanks so much, Jimmy.
I'm going to tell you a quick story about the one event I covered with John Dvorak. You remember that, right?
Absolutely. In that horrible space with the big green wall. And oh my gosh. Yeah. They're like, oh, the space is going to be ready for your event. And I had to clean the bathrooms.
Well, that's entrepreneurship for you. I've cleaned a few bathrooms in my offices.
Hey, I come from a small business family. I've done it all. I get it. Entrepreneurship, right?
That's right. So what I was going to ask you was John Dvorak in that moment. Okay. So I used a term when I talked about CBD, and I called it a non-psychoactive chemical. And he didn't take my head off because he's a nice guy, but he did correct me. And to this day, I still see people saying that, well, CBD is the non-psychoactive. And John said, no, it is psychoactive. It does react and get involved with your bloodstream and your neurotransmitters. It's non-intoxicating.
Yeah.
And that was the difference. And I use that lesson, I want to say, a half dozen times a month with people, because people, and even in the media, okay, my old comrades in the media still I'm reading articles and I'm like, seeing this stuff about CBD, which, by the way, Italy has now called CBD a narcotic. What's up with that? I don't get that at all.
That's ignorant.
But then again, we have enough issues in our own country. Let's leave the Italian issues to them, right?
Focus. No, I say all the time, I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today, like, do not trust anybody in cannabis who says that they are an expert, because there is no such thing. We are all still learning a ton. We going through research, like there's some research, but we don't know everything we need to know or that we could know about this plant. That's on one side extremely exciting and the other side super frustrating, because I mean, you and I, we know that cannabis works. It makes us feel good, and even if it's just CBD, you know, if it's helping to ease anxiety or calming you down or just helping you have a better day, that is psychoactive. But I think people conflate psychoactive with like psychedelic. Like I'm seeing colors, I'm feeling trippy. So it's all exactly. It all goes back to education, man.
I know my friends are looking at me going, "Oh, Jimmy, I've seen you like that before. We don't need to see that on."
Oh yeah, yeah,
totally. Before 5 or around 5, after 5 o'clock. I guess you can get away with it. What's up with Elevate Northeast? What plans do you have? Anything going?
So we're putting some final touches on kind of a follow-up to the Holyoke Community College, that core curriculum weekend that we did. We're putting together, it'll be in a couple weeks, for employers to come, kind of like a roundtable information sharing. That'll help kind of inform some of the curriculum that we have in the spring. We're also so close. I feel like I've been telling people this for 5 years that Elevate has a new website coming. And we really do. It's really close and it looks great. You know, we're a volunteer team and things can take a little bit longer when we're all volunteers. So, but I'm really excited to be able to launch that. So stay tuned on that. And we'd like to do some kind of like a big unveiling and get people engaged with that and maybe do some sort of social virtual event around that launch. And then next year, Tashonda Vincent Lee, who's our director of community outreach, and then Kara, who I mentioned, the director of education. 3 of us are getting together next week, a couple weekends, to put the final touches on our 2021 educational calendar. So our plan is to have a virtual, like as long as we have to, virtual event monthly that will be in line with a lot of that kind of business and entrepreneurship type of topics. So marketing, accounting, legal, IP type of stuff. And then also continuing our community conversation series that Tashonda has led. We'll do those quarterly, and those are really focused on more kind of cultural, breaking stigma, not really business, not too heavy into science. And we do those very intentionally to make cannabis approachable and easier to understand, and hopefully you know, the people that are attending are better informed in their communities. And when businesses try to open up in those communities, it shouldn't be as antagonistic as we see it is so often. So we try to educate the communities.
Sounds like, as usual, you have your hands full. And I just want to make sure you know, we're pretty sure, we've done some research on this, there aren't too many live talk shows about cannabis available on the internet. And since we started this on September 9th, we're starting to find out that we actually are doing something that no one else is doing.
Nice.
And Beth, I'm not sure that's a reflection on my madness or not, but at least I'm able to do it, and I'm finding interesting people to talk to. We're getting noticed all over the country, which is kind of a fun thing, you know, because when you're on the internet, you never know. We've had chats from people in South Africa, and we've talked to somebody in Peru who's a grower. Chris Walsh, the CEO of MJ BizCon, came on right after they decided that they weren't going to have their in-person and was only going to be virtual. And, you know, it's so difficult. I can only imagine Mark Shepard, what he's going through. Because you build it up, you've got great momentum, you're starting to add different cities, and then boom, the world shuts down. And you have to pivot. You mentioned it, lemons out of lemonade and all that.
You don't have a choice,
And yet I do think that there's still opportunities like what you're doing to get people to get more engaged. And also it gives a lot of people who are out there for you just an audience. I mean, this is socialization now. I would hate to be a 25-year-old and have to date like this. Okay.
Oh, I think about that too. That must be brutal.
I don't know how you do it. I'm not sure I could have done it. No way. I
think we would have figured out a way.
Well, yeah, I think you have to figure out a way to do it. But at some point, you know, there's that trust element. I mean, how do you get to know a stranger, right? I mean, it's just bizarro world out there now, for sure. What are going to be the biggest challenges? You know, if we see what we think is going to happen in the next week. If we all know not to trust the polls after 2016, let's just say, okay?
Vote, 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 vote. Everybody vote.
Yes, we want, in fact, I'm really encouraged. I don't know if you've seen, I think it's something like 70 million people have already voted, and that's
Amazing.
more than half that voted in the last election. I mean, that tells you something that we haven't been doing a great job. I mean, we being a country that is a free country, and getting people to understand the importance of the vote and being able to exercise that right, and how many people have died fighting for that right. And now we have an opportunity to really bond together and do the right thing as Americans, which is vote and have your voice be heard. And of course, you stick a microphone in front of me or a camera. I'm willing to share my views with just about anybody. But I'm thinking, if we go along with what the polls are saying, and we do have an administration that perhaps is a little bit more friendly to the cannabis world and recognizes the potential of the plant from a medicinal standpoint and also from an economic standpoint as well. And hopefully things move in the right direction, in my opinion, and we'll see decriminalization happen. How big of an effect is that going to have on your life and what you do? Because I know the effect it's going to have on mine.
Oh man, there's so many different kind of angles to answer that from. Because I mean, my biggest goal is that I don't have to do Elevate anymore, because people accept cannabis and there's no need to be fighting and reaching out and educating people and changing their minds. Like, that would be brilliant. But in the meantime, that it's just not an option. So, I mean, from the client side, so I work with businesses. I work with a multi-state operator. I work with a technology company. I work with a law firm. Each of them are going to be affected in a different way, from packaging to like a law firm that's maybe worked more on the regulatory side. If we're all legal now, they're going to have to maybe change the focus of their work. Or
to lawsuits.
Yeah, litigation is coming, baby. Oh my gosh, litigation is the big thing. Jen Cabrera from Vicente Cedarburg did a session on litigate, like the writing's on the wall. It's cannabis, but at the same time, it's an industry and it's business, and the types of business disputes that arise in manufacturing or whatever, they're going to happen here too. And particularly, I think in the like intellectual property area, and I don't know, litigation is definitely going to come. In real estate litigation, people that have gotten bad deals and now things are legal, things are going to change, and maybe a landlord or a property owner, I don't know, it's going to be messy for a little while, but that's opportunity depending on what your business is. Yeah, it really, really depends, but hopefully someday I don't have to do Elevate anymore. It's just going to be kind of a learning process together, because like I said, I've got a client, Betty's Eddies, like packaging. How is it, like, it's a different package from state to state, or different dosing. Do we have to care about that anymore? Or do we still want to respond to what local markets want? So there's going to be all sorts of different decisions, I think, coming up. But I really do think that 2021 is going to be the year, regardless of who the president is, because prohibition and not having access to financial services just isn't sustainable. It makes no sense. And every day more people are learning more about cannabis and getting comfortable with it and seeing it as a business, and seeing that, my gosh, why can't they have a bank account? So yeah, it'll definitely be different, but I feel like 2021 is the year, regardless of who the president is.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And even if they just take it from a illegal perspective and make it a decriminalized perspective, that is going to take away the first reaction to people, or the first resistance to it. I don't want to get involved with anything illegal. That was always the thing that you had to decide when somebody was at a party once maybe and passed you something and go, gee, I know this is really illegal, but people are having fun with this. And that was always the first barrier to overcome. And you take that away, and you're right. I think the effect on the stigma is going to be profound. However, I do not think it's going to go away because you still got 80 years of misinformation, propaganda.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that stigma runs deep. I catch myself sometimes, Jimmy, like maybe being a little secretive, like if I'm with family or something, and I'm going to go outside and smoke with my cousins. It's like, wait, we can just do that right here. Like, we don't have to walk up the road. Like, this is legal.
Right.
So, no, it's the stigma part's really strong still.
Except you're not supposed to smoke it in public. You know, that you can do it in the privacy of your own home. Of course, you're going to stink up your whole home, but you can do it in there legally. But if you go outside, you know, you could get a traffic ticket, or a law enforcement person, a police person may come to you and say, you know, I can write you a ticket for that, but I'm not. Just put it out, right? Because that's what most of the law enforcement people are doing. I'm sure
that's the experience I would have, but I would assume that as a white woman, but that's not the experience that other people have, particularly people of color. It still happens. The disproportionate arrest rate is still there.
It's disgusting. Okay, when I saw those stats for 2019, and of course, you know, the headline is, you know, cannabis arrests declined from 2018 to 2019, and then you look at the total of 536,000 arrests for cannabis, which is about 50,000 more arrests for violent crimes. And of that, I believe 92% were for possession, and of course, then you get into the disproportionate amount of arrests against people of color, and it is the facts, that information alone makes me ill. And you know, I salute the Steve D'Angelos of the Last Prisoner Project of the world, the law firms like Vicente Cederberg and Burns and Levinson, who have active cannabis operations, and you know, they're fighting for the rights of people that have been incarcerated, and it just doesn't make sense at this point now. And it's an opportunity, again, to create programs to rehabilitate and get these people back into society. It's definitely a big guilt trip for people that are of my race, okay? I get disgusted about what we have done to those people, and I'm really hoping that things will change through this process of voting, Beth, right?
So important, so important. And folks like you and me just being open and, you know, trying not to be ashamed of our own cannabis use. And like somebody running for office in my district, I noticed she posted something on Facebook about what's better than a cold beer after you vote. I was like, cannabis. It's like, put it out there, like remind people it's totally legal, and we live in such a strong alcohol culture, and that, you know, I have had some success, but that is hard, convincing people that, hey, you know, you don't need a hangover every day, or the calories, you know, but I've had a little bit of success trying to get some of my friends on like the low dose edibles just to get off of booze. Like booze, we're getting too old for that.
And I'm older than anybody in the room right now, Beth, so I so appreciate. I miss you. I miss everybody involved with the cannabis world. We used to meet on Boylston Street after events, or Marion McNabb. I mean, I just, you know, it's like every time I was on Boylston Street, I always was running into her after events.
I'm going to see her on Friday. She's coming over. We're going to hang out on Friday afternoon.
So give her a big hug for me, please.
I will. We'll cheat.
At least a virtual hug. Can you do that? A virtual hug? Social
I think I might give her a real actual hug.
There you go. Well,
and then we'll lifestyle each other.
A huggable person, too. So please send my regards to them. And again, you have pretty much carte blanche to use me in whatever capacity you'd like to spread the word about educating the public about cannabis.
Thanks so much, Jimmy. I appreciate it. It's definitely a team effort. And like I said, it's a responsibility. So appreciate your support. Always. Beth Waterfall,
and
hopefully I'll see you sometime soon.
Yeah, I hope so. You're welcome in studio, too. So you know how to find me. Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. It's so great. So, you know what's kind of neat about this live streaming thing? And, you know, for years I was on the commercial media side, so I'd take a break, you know, and that's a good thing because it gives you personally a break. You can go and, you know, take care of business, you could get a glass of water. But in this case, we just keep going and going. I feel like the Energizer Bunny sometimes. There's just no quitting us. And sure enough, when I hear the ding dong, that means someone's in the waiting room. And that is probably Emma Chasen, who is going to join us. Oh, excuse me, my director says I get to take a break. So we are going to go to one little video first, and then we're going to bring in Emma Chasen from Oregon. Don't go away. This is kind of what we call a sizzle reel in the business. It's kind of just a review of all the different programs and stuff that we've done over the last year. It's only a couple of minutes long. We'll see you on the other side.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Well, hello there. Here we are again, another live stream from the new studio of Pro Cannabis Media. This is Cannabis Chat, and I'm Jimmy Young. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Every week, Kurt and I get together to review some of the biggest stories in the cannabis industry. He and I talk about them. We have a few comments, and then we get reports from Canada, New York, and Washington, D.C.
And this week's no different, Jimmy. We finally have Vermont moving toward recreational cannabis with retail opening in their state. We have an old state and a new state, Colorado and Illinois, both setting cannabis sales records in July, as well as multiple efforts to legalize the cannabis plant in America, including our friend Steve D'Angelo getting involved.
But first, let's go to Deborah Borchardt in New York to check on the financial weed scene. Deborah?
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Jimmy. Well, things seem to keep going the wrong way for Charlotte's Web.
Whoa, Jimmy Young, in the weeds on the water this week. We've got the CEO of Kushko, Nick Kovacevic, with me. This guy has built his little company in 6 years from $2 billion in sales to $145 million in sales.
We can get this thing to be fully legal here in the next few years, I believe, but it's going to take far longer for the stigma to change.
I think you guys are the pro cannabis story.
And I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Jody Roberts with Eastern Security State, and I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Laura Beener. I'm the president and co-founder of The Healing Rose, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. It's been such an integral part of our success here at The Healing Rose.
And you know what? The best media company out there is Pro Cannabis Media. Look out for them. They'll make you famous.
Hi, I'm George, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. I also love Western Mass Hydroponics, where we've got everything you need from seed to bloom to bud, and then to smoke it afterwards.
All right, welcome back to Cannabis Chat for a Wednesday afternoon. I'm Jimmy Young, your host. I am here 3 afternoons a week now from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, live, talking about cannabis. On Mondays, we do a Medicinal Monday show. On Wednesday, it's Professor Weed Wednesdays, where we talk to educators in the cannabis space. And on Friday, it's all about the business of cannabis with our friend David Rabinovitz, and we call that show The Green Rush. Joining us now from Oregon is Emma Chasen, who has been on In the Weeds in the past and is a educator and a consultant and a former bud tender of the year in Oregon. And Emma, I don't know if that leads your resume off anymore, but I know that it's on there somewhere, right?
It definitely is. 2016, which feels like, eons ago, I was crowned Portland's best bud tender. It's a proud achievement of mine. Not quite at the top of the resume, but proud.
Right, but it's still very nice, and it's a feather in your cap. And now you're running a consulting business. I believe it's Eminent Consulting?
Correct. Yes. Co-founder and lead educator over at Eminent.
There you go. And you also have an online course, certificate course available for people as well, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. Really focused on the fundamentals of cannabis science.
And can I ask you how many hours and how much that is? Because we get a lot of different educators, as you can imagine. I mean, Max Simon from Green Flower has been on with us, you know who he is, obviously, out on the West Coast. But how does your course work? How many hours? And how would somebody sign up for that and get involved?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, you could find all of our courses now through our website. There's a big button for you to go to our full course library. The entirety of the program, which we call Fundamental Elements of Cannabis Science, has 8 courses. Now, each course is broken down into many different smaller lessons and video modules for easier digestibility. And you can either take each course individually or you can spring for the whole program. The individual courses run anywhere between $30 to $100 a piece. And then the full program is $500 for an individual, but we also do onboard a lot of businesses. And so we have group rates for dispensaries as well.
And you probably, I'm guessing that that's a pretty active component of what you do, because dispensaries are always looking to hire educated patient advocates, or using the word, the bud tender, because when you get people to come in to those dispensaries, you want to have some kind of knowledge, because you get so many questions from so many people with different experiences with the plant, right?
Completely. I mean, bud tending, it is a quote unquote entry level job. However, bud tenders have a huge responsibility to not only represent the entire industry, the market behind them, but also interface with patients and customers who are oftentimes asking questions and talking about medical concerns that their doctors can't even answer. So therefore, I mean, how can you ethically, as a business owner, let your staff go onto the sales floor without any kind of training around cannabis science, cannabis's purported effects?
Right. And Lord knows we're learning more and more about this plant every day as research continues, maybe not so much in the United States, but definitely around the world, especially in Israel, which has really kind of led the world as far as research goes. What are some of the newest things in research that perhaps you've heard about that concern you or excite you?
So I mostly get excited for research, even if it's research that maybe doesn't, facilitate a preconceived notion of mine. I just think it's all exciting. To learn more about this medicinal plant is amazing to me. Recently, the piece of research that I've seen and read cause a bit of controversy in, especially, the cannabis science space, has been a paper out of New Zealand that came out the beginning of 2020 that basically tested a bunch of terpene isolates and elucidated that terpenes do not have an impact on our cannabinoid receptors. And this caused a lot of headlines, a lot of people to say that terpenes don't, necessarily mediate an entourage effect, or they don't influence the cannabis experience at all. But in my opinion, especially after reading the paper, I just think that could not be further from the truth.
Right. And most people that I talk to who understand that the terpene is the steering mechanism of the plant, as far as whether it's a sativa leaning, a focus leaning, or a relaxing leaning pain killing one on the indica side, and the terpene kind of steers the plant in that way. So whenever you see research like that, it gets you upset. What can we do about it?
I think it's important to approach it with a sense of scientific rationale, to really talk about the paper in its entirety rather than maybe the abstract paragraph that somebody's just read themselves, or even the headlines, that are being produced from this research to gain eyes on their article. I think that really looking at the whole, just as we look at cannabis as a whole plant matrix that mediates this kind of ensemble effect, we need to look at the whole picture when it comes to research. So who's funding this research? Where is this research coming from? Is there any inherent bias in this research? What kind of materials and methods are being used? In the case of this paper that we're talking about, they used terpene isolates. So they did not use terpenes that were derived from the cannabis plant. They used terpenes that were synthesized test in the lab. So we don't know if terpenes are working together then through the cannabis matrix to produce some of these effects that were not seen in a lab environment.
Let's talk about the synthetics and synthetic cannabis that's out there that people are using or creating in their labs. And what is it? Tell me why you think we're seeing that, and is it being funded by what a lot of people perceive as big pharma, because they don't want to have to rely on the grow people, they want to create it in their labs?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that when we look at these kind of synthesized or lab-produced preparations of cannabinoids like Sativex or Marinol or Epidiolex, I mean, one, it's really hard to create a standardized dose for a patient population with a medicinal plant, especially a medicinal plant that has much variability as cannabis does, right? So 4 milligrams of THC might work perfectly for me in a certain strain, but 400 milligrams of THC may be needed for somebody else. So what the pharmaceutical industry is looking to do is really isolate these compounds, synthesize them down in a lab, and then create reproducible, consistent results for patients where they can have a standardized dose window so that they do have a subset of predictable and consistent effects and experiences. There is definitely a piece of this that is, I mean, pharmaceutical marketing, right? As you said, you can't make a lot of money because you don't have that kind of consistent, predictable experience when you look at the plant. I mean, even we're talking about, you know, environmental factors that come through with cultivation or manufacturing that we see in the industry. It's just not reproducible for the masses. And that's what the pharmaceutical industry looks for. So I think it's both. I mean, there is definitely scientific rationale for wanting to isolate out a compound and create that really predictable, consistent effect that everybody can rely on. But you just inherently lose some of the magic and therapeutic potential from especially cannabis when you do that.
Right, and we all know, given our own knowledge and our own experience, that the effects of the cannabis plant change from person to person based on their own individual endocannabinoid system, based on the entourage effect, based on their own metabolism and experience with the product. You know, and the whole start low and go slow for people that haven't really experienced it all and just want to try it a little bit, then try a 2.5 milligram or a 5 milligram edible before you jump into the average dose, which I believe is 10 for adults. And, you know, I've noticed my own intake has increased on the edible side because it isn't getting me the same effect when I first started to try it that way. And I think everyone, for the most part, who uses cannabis, and I say everyone, the majority still use it as a flower product and in a smoking environment. That's what the research says about that. Does that back up what you know too as well?
Yes, absolutely. All the demographic analytics that we've seen, flower still definitely reigns supreme as far as the most popular product category. And I mean, just to speak to the variability that you were just talking about around every person having a very unique personal experience with cannabis and that experience changing over time. I mean, it could even change dependent on the day. Our endocannabinoid system is constantly in flux. Our physiology is constantly in flux dependent on our own environmental factors. So where we are at with our mental, emotional health, what we're putting into our body as far as food and water. I mean, there are so many different factors that can cause a change in our cannabis experience. And so when we think about kind of trying to harness the therapeutic potential of cannabis, which is so great, and put it into this very allopathic model, which is what we have now, as far as, you know, you have one compound and then you have a subset of consistent effects from it. I just think it's a fallacy. I think that you will definitely be sacrificing some of that therapeutic potential when you take away the personal element of it.
You know, you mentioned something in one of your answers a few minutes ago about headlines, media, how information is absorbed by the audience, by people who are out there. Right now, the heads of a lot of the social media companies, Google and Facebook and Twitter, are well, they're not, I don't know if they're before Congress, but they're definitely talking to Congress, probably on a Zoom call, testifying on it. And, you know, it's definitely hit I think the peak of their impact on their world. But because the consumer is in charge of their use and their digestion of media, they get to choose which news show they watch or which network. They get to choose which headline they might believe even before they even look at the story, because headlines grab the attention of the audience and it makes you react to the story, so you might be interested in it. They tease you with headlines, but the writers of the stories are not the headline writers. They're the tease writers. They're the headline writers. Are you concerned about how the media, present company excluded on this, does still look for the anti-story about cannabis? It's like, I'm trying to remember who said this, but whenever the industry stumbles, it's a headline and it leads the 6 o'clock news. But when the plant saves someone's life, no one's around to tell that story. Are you concerned about how much effect social media and our own perception of media has on the cannabis space right now?
Definitely. I mean, I think that, for one, the cannabis industry has been dealing with this for a long time. So it's nothing new to us. So we can adapt and kind of easily work around it. However, it does inhibit the mission and the evolution of an industry that, to be real, is actually financially upholding many of these states that have just been decimated through COVID. And that is also providing amazing therapeutic potential for people with a variety of ailments that Western medicine doesn't really have an answer for. So it's frustrating when we see those kinds of headlines, when, you know, there is a magnifying glass, so to speak, on the cannabis industry, just waiting for that mess up, waiting for that hiccup to then really make a huge deal out of. But it's indicative of this still ever-present negative stigma around cannabis. And I mean, we can furthermore talk about the amount of people still in jail for this plant, even in states that do have legal programs, and the majority of those people being Black and brown people, while, you know, white people tend to profit the most off of this legal industry. So there are a lot of things that we still need to work out, I think, from our kind of societal perspective of how we think about cannabis and how we then modulate the industries.
So in our experience, and I think I know I wrote this blog yesterday. I don't know when we're releasing it, but I did just write this blog about the power of social media and the impact and how they can literally dictate buying behaviors based on search. And I just wonder now, when I put out a video on Facebook or on YouTube, and whether or not it's going to, conflict with their community guidelines, let's just say, because we've had a couple of instances where some of our videos, interviews, have been taken down. And of course, you have that dispute process, and of course, they just say, yep, denied. They don't, whatever. And a lot of it has to do with, we're talking about what they consider to be a drug, because federally it is still classified there. If we move forward, and if we're able to change this administration, and the Democrats do come into control, and they are, touting the fact that they will decriminalize cannabis, perhaps even in the next 6 months, how much of a hit will that be on that stigma? And will we see less, what I would call, social media censorship in action here?
That is definitely the hope. I mean, especially as business owners, where social media is now, especially in COVID age, a necessary evil when it comes to marketing. We can't really market our business. We can't advertise our business, even if it is advertising education. I still can't run an ad, even though I'm not selling any product or not even really promoting any product, right? It's just talking about the scientific information around this plant that everybody deserves to know whether they consume it or not. And so the hope is that there will be a change in administration come next week, and that we will see some decriminalization policy move forward on a federal level. I think that from, public polling, we've seen that the majority of Americans support some kind of public access program to cannabis. And so it's time that the federal government catches up and at least decriminalizes, so that we can see that stigma reduction and ultimately get people the medicine that they deserve.
Right. It's really amazing to me that in 2020, in a legal state like Oregon, a legal state like Massachusetts, we still have these conversations. And hopefully we will see democracy work. And I say hopefully because, first of all, I want this to be the largest turnout in my lifetime for a presidential election. It is so important. We preach the voting thing here. We were preaching it a lot, and I continue to just say, look, even if you don't agree with my political views, just go out and vote against them. It's your right as a citizen, as a human being. People have died for the right to vote, and we still have a free country. And I still believe that we will have more good people, and good will go against evil, let's just say. And more importantly, we will see the biggest turnout in history. And I do think, by the way, that you can stay up all night Tuesday night after Election Day to wait and see if it's going to be weeks before we know for sure, right? He's not going down easy. Let's just say.
No. I'm planning for like a month, and then it's like, okay, even then, we'll see how long it goes, but at least we'll start the process, the arduous process of hopefully changing leadership.
That's right. And, it's funny, you mentioned the challenges as a marketing person in this space. It's one of the things that we talk about is there's education that needs to be done of businesses and how they can control their message and share it with the opt-in, the people that are opting in for more information, the people that are interested in more information. You can reach those people through social media. But of course, you have to be careful about what you're using as your message as you reach those people, because they still can take down your content. They can put a community strike against you, whatever they want to do. And you, as a producer or someone who's an educator, you don't have a lot of strength to fight that. And I don't know how that's going to change or how quickly that's going to change, but I do believe that somehow, some way, we will be moving in that direction, and we'll see some kind of a change. What's a good piece of advice for I'm a new dispensary owner in a legal state. How do I market my services besides the sign outside that really can't say, hey, weed for sale here?
Mm-hmm. I would immediately make sure to invest in your staff. Your staff is the only distinguishing factor that you have as a business. I mean, sure, smart branding and design definitely play a role here, but ultimately, your staff, your bud tenders specifically, they're the face of your business. They're the ones who are interacting with your customers. They're the ones who will be generating customer loyalty and retention, hopefully. And so make sure to invest in them, make sure to pay them fair wages, give them educational opportunities, and really have confidence that they can effectively represent your brand.
And it is all about the brand when it comes to marketing. And even regulations state that the name, your own brand, has to be somewhat related but not blatant. And in Massachusetts alone, you've got Cultivate, you've got Revolutionary Clinics, you've got the New England Treatment Access Group, you've got come on, help me. Come on, Dan, help me. Give me another name. Give me another dispensary.
Don't you have Garden Remedies out by you?
ComCan, thank you. What'd you say, Emma?
Garden Remedies?
Of course, Garden Remedies is out there too. Yes, and they're in my hometown. Syrah Naturals is another one too that I frequent. So, again, it's not, hey, weed for sale here. It's not like a liquor store, alcohol. It's something subtle, something, you've got to find out about. And, that still bugs me that they're putting so many restrictions and regulations. But I really wonder what will happen once that federal tag is taken away. and they deschedule or reschedule it and decriminalize it federally. I'm fascinated by the whole industry anyway, and I think that's another reason why all of us enjoy being in it, because you are part of history, right?
Yes. Oh my God. I mean, even 5 years ago when I entered into the legal industry in Oregon, it felt like, oh, they're going to make documentaries about this time. You know, HBO will have a special about the beginning of cannabis legalization. And that's exciting. That's fun. That's also why I continue to love cannabis science, because we're constantly discovering new things. We're constantly having to innovate towards new problems and challenges that come our way. And with federal legalization or descheduling or decriminalization on the horizon, I mean, we are going to have a whole new subset of obstacles to deal with, but hopefully also some doors opening into, you know, better business practices, such as being able to bank safely. That's also crazy that we can't do that as cannabis businesses. Being able to advertise and market, you know, being able to talk about this plant as it deserves to be talked about through an educational lens, where hopefully healthcare providers and physicians don't have to worry about risking their license if they talk about it to a patient. So federal legalization or even just reform, you know, of cannabis policy could bring us a lot of good, although a lot of challenges as well.
Well, that's why we're in this thing. I know you are in Oregon. I know that Oregon has just come through a horrific chapter in the state's history with all the fires that's out there. I know that we both watch Grow in Belushi, and I know that Jim is involved in fundraising for some of the farms that did get destroyed. Do you happen to know of any of those farms or dispensaries that have been wiped out by these fires?
I don't know any of them personally, I'll say, but I know that Southern Oregon, which is the region where Belushi is with his farm, and where many of the state's, you know, legacy outdoor farms have been, we're talking years and years, even through Prohibition, have got destroyed. People's houses have gotten destroyed. It is so terrible and sad. So it was wonderful to see what Jim Belushi is doing for the community, because it is sorely needed down there.
Yeah, he's such a great advocate for the product. Before we talked and you came on, you know, we did talk. We both have watched all 3 episodes of Grow in Belushi, and it is a program that I recommend to anybody who's interested in learning about what it's like to be a farmer in this time with a crop about cannabis. And he takes a great way. He's able to create clever ways to educate during the program and still entertain, inform, and enlighten. And that's what I think separates what he did from pretty much all the documentaries that are out there. Because, I mean, let's face it, we hear stories all the time now about how cannabis has saved people's lives, that cannabis has changed people's lives. Jim Belushi's role in this industry, where do you think that's going to end up?
Oh, wow. I mean, it can go so many different places. I think right now he's doing amazing things for not only the Oregon community, but the cannabis community at large in the States to reverse that stigma. I think that, just as you said, he's combining like a fun, witty, kind of engaging, entertaining attitude, along with just how, you know, serious and beautiful it is, the way that cannabis can impact people's lives. And that intersection is so important. Cannabis is serious, and yes, it has amazing medical therapeutic potential, but it's also fun. A lot of people use it to have fun. And so we should make it whimsical and engaging, and really approach it with a wonder and an awe of the powers of this plant. And I think that Jim Belushi does that really, really well.
And I like that he has a self-deprecating sense of humor too. When he totally destroyed Captain Jack's plants, he left the lights on. I just think that was a perfectly staged element in the program. And I can't wait one day to talk to Jim and say, okay, did you really do that, or was that enhanced for Hollywood effect, if you will?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Right? Because it was funny. The first episode was just like, oh my God, that's such a riot. And his trip to Colombia with his cousin was awesome. I really hope that he gets a chance to do more of these types of episodes, because I really think the world needs to see the plant in its true form, which is how he approaches it, and the different conflicts he has within his own family, and talking about that, and that intervention scene, and his boys, and the cousin, and I just think they did a great job with it. I'm a big fan. I think
it pulls in so many, different aspects of what it takes to not only run a cannabis business, but also to be in a community that centers around cannabis.
There you go. Hey, it is a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it, Emma?
Oh, yes, it is. We're just living in it.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I enjoyed talking with you both before the show and now, and I hope we get a chance to do this on a more regular basis in some capacity. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
All right. That's Emma Chasen from Eminent Consulting out of Oregon, and this has been another edition of Cannabis Chat, our Professor Weed Wednesdays, and we will be back Friday for Cannabis Chat with David Rabinovitz, the Green Rush, and we will be talking about some of the issues that are going on in the social equity community here in Massachusetts and also around the world and the United States of America, which is where we are, and that's why we continue to ask you all to exercise your right and vote next week, or I think mail-in's pretty much, I don't know if you could still mail it in, but if you have your mail vote, you can bring it into a ballot box. And please, leave the ballot boxes alone, you vandals out there. There's been horrible stories about people doing stupid things in the middle of the night to the ballot boxes. Please, consider it a sacred part of democracy. That's what voting is. Anyway, for everybody here at PCM, I'm Jimmy Young. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Cannabis Chat.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. And today we have a very special guest. I guess you could almost say this is a coast-to-coast interview because I'm on the East Coast outside of Boston, Mass. And Emma Chasen, and by the way, I'm hoping that is how you pronounce your last name.
Yes, that's perfect.
Whew. Emma Chasen is out in Portland, Oregon on the left coast or the Pacific coast, if you will. So Emma, thank you so much for joining us today on In the Weeds. And I look forward to talking with you because you are all about online education about the cannabis sativa plant, correct?
Yes. Yes, I am. And thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
Cool. Well, you actually did spend some time on the East Coast at Brown University, I believe in Providence, Rhode Island. Am I right?
You are right. And I am a born and raised New Yorker. So I was born and raised East Coast, but I did move out to Portland about 5 years ago.
Well, I certainly won't hold the fact that you're from New York, because I'm from Boston, and you know that whole New York-Boston sports rivalry thing. But since the Boston teams have won so many championships in the 21st century, I don't even get into that anymore.
Oh, get out of here.
Tell me a little bit. First of all, your major at Brown actually had something to do with plants, correct?
Correct. Yes. So I was very fortunate to study undergrad at Brown, where there is no core curriculum. So really they empower students to design whatever coursework resonates with them. And I was able to create a specialized track within the biology department where I looked at specifically medicinal plant research, pre-medical sciences, as well as ethnobotany. So the way in which indigenous peoples have used medicinal plants throughout history.
Wow. And you practiced that line because that was a great elevator pitch about your education and how special that was for you. How in the world did you get interested in learning about plant medicine?
So I grew up in quite a loud and robust Italian family full of very loud Italian women that actually had roots in plant medicine. So we are from an island in Italy called Ischia, and my great-great-grandmother actually practiced a lot of the Italian folk tradition there, brought that over with her to New York City when she immigrated, and my family has kind of kept that tradition. And so growing up, we absolutely absolutely integrated different plant medicine as well as different spiritual modalities from that Italian folk tradition since I can remember. So it's always been a part of my life. And then coming into Brown, I took a freshman year seminar titled Botanical Roots of Modern Medicine. And that's when it kind of clicked for me that, oh, I could study this more formally and actually try to devise a career path from it.
And lo and behold, here we are in 2020, and cannabis has been legalized by 11 states and the Washington, D.C. area as well. I believe 33 states have medical programs, and it's now a political issue. I cannot believe I've lived to actually see this day, where in my home state, my native state of Massachusetts, it's legal, it's here, and of course it's been deemed essential in so many other states during the COVID shutdown. So I pinch myself almost every day that I'm out here actually talking about cannabis and learning every day, because I really do believe there is so much to learn, and I am absolutely fascinated with the science behind the plant. The fact that they can actually dictate, or should I say, you guys, you botanists out there, can actually dictate the DNA of the plant and what kind of effect it's going to have. I just can't believe we've gotten to this point, and I actually think we're still just scratching the surface. Am I right?
Absolutely, would agree. I am so excited about cannabis because there is such huge potential for discovery. I often compare it to like the space age, you know, where this is our new frontier. It's a brand new industry. And as you said, we are just scratching the surface of what we understand about this plant. There is still so much more to know, specifically in the way that it interacts with our bodies. And that is full of excitement for me as a scientist.
And of course, every body has a different body, and everybody has an endocannabinoid system. Every mammal has an endocannabinoid system in it. And just understanding what that system does and how it impacts our pain receptors and just our whole behaviors is amazing unto itself. And every day it seems like they're discovering a new cannabinoid, another cannabidiol chemical. That's what they call the little chemicals, the CBDs and the CBNs, right? And the THC.
Yes, the cannabinoids. Yes.
The cannabinoids. It seems like every day they're discovering new ones and finding out what that particular one does. But here's a question I always ask scientists, and I definitely consider you and respect you as a scientist. The role of the terpene in the cannabis plant. Can you define, in layman's terms, what terpenes do as they interact with the THC and the CBD and the CBN that's in the cannabis plant?
Yes. So terpenes are our aromatic compounds, and that means that they give plants their smell. They are found abundantly in most plants in nature, even some insects. However, they are highly concentrated in the cannabis plant. And from the plant's perspective, they're really, really good at fending off any kinds of pests, pathogens, or predators. So they have a lot of insecticidal properties, and they also have quite a pungent smell and taste. So for animals who would come and munch on the plant, they really deter those munchers from attacking the plant. So they help the plant's survival. However, when we as humans consume them, they also have therapeutic applications within our own body. And actually, they're able to work together synergistically, as we call it, with the cannabinoids to amplify the therapeutic potential of the experience. And they do this by interacting with many different receptor families and physiological factors and targets in our body. A really common one is the serotonin system, which most people know serotonin is kind of our happy molecule. It's our mood stabilizer. And there are a lot of terpenes that can actually influence this system to promote anxiety relief and mood elevation and euphoria.
You know, you mentioned the odor of the cannabis plant and the role that the terpene plays in it. As you probably know, there's a pungent odor to cannabis sativa. A lot of people either really like it or find it abhorrent. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Will it ever exist that we will have a odor-free cannabis sativa plant?
You absolutely can breed a plant to have 0 terpenes. And so if you do that, then yes, the odor is actually really vegetal. It just smells kind of like a vegetable. And there are some varieties that definitely teeter towards that end of the spectrum. However, I would definitely encourage people, if they say that they hate the smell, maybe they just haven't smelled the right terpene yet. There are some really bright citrusy notes. There are some really sweet kind of lavender notes to it. There are some spicy notes. I truly believe that there might be a smell for everybody out there.
And everybody has a smell, so there you go. So one of them, I think, is it myrcene and limacine?
Myrcene and limonene, so close.
Yeah, right. That's I've always been close, but unfortunately only in horseshoes. Does that help me? So back to this combination, the terpene interaction with the THC and the CBD, and everybody knows CBD because of how that particular chemical, I believe, has been abused by the business community because, as you know, Mitch McConnell, who we really don't like in the cannabis space, let's just say, he did help pass the Farm Bill in December of 2018. And I always point the finger at him because he's anti-cannabis, but he doesn't realize that by passing the Farm Bill, he opened up the Pandora's box for CBD to be considered a legal substance. And now, of course, the DEA and the FDA are pointing fingers at each other and saying, no, it's your responsibility. No, it's your responsibility. Oh, well, it's only our responsibility if it's over 0.3% THC. And then it's your responsibility. And it makes my brain hurt just to sit here and try to understand all that. The CBD phenomenon, what's your feeling about that and your opinions about where you think we might end up going using CBD and having it more accepted, if you will, in our products, whether that's drinking or food products?
Sure. Yeah. I really think that CBD can be considered kind of a gateway, not only to cannabis, but also to plant medicine as a whole. So part of what I hope that the cannabis industry can really teach people is that there are a lot of varieties of plant medicine that we can use for preventative medicine in regards to just elevated health and wellness. And understandably so, there's a lot of trepidation around cannabis and THC in particular. The war on drugs did a number to people as far as their fear around cannabis. And what CBD is doing now, since it's nationally legal, it's allowing people to get a little bit more comfortable with plant medicine, with cannabis. I think that it is incredibly important that the CBD industry especially moves forward with some really smart regulations so that we can make sure that consumers are receiving transparency as far as what's going into these products, how they're being tested, how the plant material is being grown, so that when people do choose to kind of take that leap and purchase that CBD oil, they can be assured that there is an accurate concentration of CBD, that there is no pesticides in that formula, and that it has been formulated and extracted for maximum therapeutic potential for the experience that the consumer is looking for. So I hope that from a regulatory perspective, that's the path that we go down. Otherwise, currently what's happening is that there is a lot of snake oil on the market. And so people who are interested in CBD, they're really excited about it. They go and purchase some CBD oil, but maybe it's not manufactured ethically, or it's not tested properly, or it's just hemp seed oil that doesn't even have any CBD in there. And then what you get is a really frustrated consumer base who kind of loses any hope in plant medicine, right? So I think that there is the definitely optimistic option that this national CBD industry could, if regulated properly, really help people feel more comfortable with plant medicine, specifically cannabis.
Yeah. How confident are you that our regulatory agencies will be doing that?
We'll see what happens in November with the change around.
I'll tell you what, there's going to be a lot of people heading north of the border if a certain thing doesn't happen. Let's just say, I try to avoid politics, but it's amazing that the cannabis word is part of the divide between Republicans and Democrats in Washington, D.C. I mean, I smile because I'm so frustrated by the whole political system right now. But that's, again, a story for another day. Do you find, is the CBD industry, at least the cannabis industry has the NCIA, the National Cannabis Industry Association. It has lobbyists in Washington looking out for the cannabis industry. But CBD is just an offshoot of that. Do you find that the CBD world is being properly represented as far as lobbyists go? Or is it, again, just kind of a, let's throw it up against the wall and see what sticks?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's closer to the latter. I mean, there are definitely hemp associations, especially hemp grower associations, that are advocating for better regulation and legislation around the agricultural perspective, especially as we move into more industrial hemp. However, from the CBD health and wellness standpoint, I mean, currently the FDA doesn't allow CBD to be formulated into any dietary supplement or edible product. And I mean, for any of us who have even a little bit of an understanding of the CBD industry, that's laughable, because most of the products on the market are dietary supplements or in edible form. And so it's kind of the wild, wild west out here, where people are interpreting the rules as they do, and kind of just, like you said, throwing it up on the wall, seeing what sticks, and kind of just crossing their fingers that the FDA doesn't take notice of them.
Now, Oregon, one of the early adapters, if you will, maybe not the earliest, but I believe they followed Washington State, since California and Washington State had both, I think, were a little bit further advanced than Oregon. But now Oregon had a glut of supply, and I believe they weren't able to do much with it. What's your current review and kind of opinion about the cannabis businesses in Oregon?
So the market has definitely stabilized since that 2017 crash, where we just had huge supply and very little demand. And I think that this can kind of launch into a conversation around the lack of consumer adoption and education. So Oregon is a state of around 4 million people. Only 14% of the market at the beginning of legalization were consuming cannabis, and that number stayed pretty steady. So there was no large rate of consumer adoption, whereas on the other side, the industry side, there was quite huge growth in the amount of companies that were coming onto the scene with this kind of false mindset, unfortunately, that it was the green rush. They were going to make a ton of money and just kill it because it's legal weed. Who doesn't love legal weed? Everybody's going to want to come by. And that's just not what happened. And even more sadly, in Oregon, because we have such a black market legacy, there were a lot of outdoor family farms in Southern Oregon that joined the legal market, again, with the hope of going legal, making more money, and they just unfortunately did not have that experience. I mean, a lot of businesses shut down, and there was a lot of consolidation of the market. Canadian companies came in, other companies from California came in and kind of bought up a lot of the landscape. I will say that craft still prevails in Oregon. Portland prides itself on craft beer, craft wine, craft food, and craft cannabis. And so there are a few mom and pop kind of craft boutique strongholds left. However, because of that glut, we saw a huge percentage of consolidation.
Gotcha. And I don't know, did you get to see that Discovery Channel show that starred Jim Belushi this past week, Growing Belushi? Because it's about an Oregon farm. That's where he has his farm.
Yes, I haven't seen the first episode, but I actually was lucky enough to interview Jim Belushi for a radio show that I was on, and he has a really cool operation going down in Southern Oregon.
Yes, he does. And I recommend the show because now I've watched it twice, obviously for educational purposes and entertainment purposes as well. I've always been a big fan of his, and of course, idolized his late brother. And it was on this past show where Jim said basically that, look, if medical marijuana had been around during the time of the early days, the pioneering days of Saturday Night Live in the 70s, he believes his brother would still be alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Which is kind of sad, but that is how he feels. And of course, now he has embraced the industry. And I did really enjoy the program on many different fronts. And the character development is going to be fascinating. I believe it is Captain Jack is the herb that he was so excited about being able to grow. And the character of the grower. Now, I'm going out on a limb thinking, you at one point, I believe I looked at your bio, you were a bud tender of the year at some point out in Oregon, yes?
Yes, that is correct.
How honored were you to be known as the bud tender of the year?
I was quite honored to be Portland's best bud tender of 2016. It was just when I started my career in cannabis was 2015. So it was nice to be recognized by the people in that sense.
So speaking of people, the character of the grower, how many interesting characters have you met who are just growers?
Oh, I mean, so many. That's a great thing about being a bud tender is that you get to really see all sides of the industry. You get to meet people from all walks of life who are participating. And I would say that the role of the grower, they definitely have the craziest stories. I mean, a lot of them had grown through prohibition. And so kind of the novel approaches that they took to just survive during that time, and also the deep love and reverence of the cannabis plant was something that was always so stunning to me.
Oh, and for many people who have enjoyed it, perhaps even as long as I've enjoyed it, there's always something new to learn, which kind of leads me into the next wave of questions about your online educational offerings. I've always said that you get to a point sometime in your age where you really do believe you have something to teach everyone. And it comes from experience, life experience, whether you have book knowledge about a specific subject or not. But I really do believe that everybody has something to teach everybody else. And in the cannabis universe, it's huge, and it's always growing. So how do you, as an educator, kind of narrow down to the basics of Cannabis 101?
So I really pull on my academic experience as well as my experience working in oncology research to be able to digest down this kind of white paper information. So this scientific evidence, which is often laden with scientific jargon, and it's very hard to understand for somebody who does not have that kind of academic experience or training. When I started as a bud tender, I just noticed a huge vacuum of accessible education where kind of we had the extremes of these scientific research papers that have been published. THC is highly researched, so the information is there, but it's really hard to understand for the lay individual. Whereas on the other side, we had a lot of blogs and kind of media websites that would publish content, but it was really hard to verify the scientific legitimacy of that information. And then you have the industry professionals who really have no kind of standardized education or training in the workplace, especially this was over 5 years ago. And it was kind of like, oh, you love to smoke weed? Great. You're behind the counter. Get ready to sell. And to me, that was just such a disservice to the patient community who was asking questions that their doctors couldn't even answer. And it was also a liability on the side of the business. And so I set about to create this curriculum that really nailed down the fundamentals of cannabis science so that bud tenders, as well as other industry professionals, could best predict experience for patients and consumers alike. And because I did work in the role of bud tender, and I also was a general manager of the shop, and then I eventually carved out a role as director of education for myself, I was really able to do the market research to take this curriculum through many iterations to kind of piece it down until I found the exact kind of recipe for what I believe that any bud tender should know before they go out there and they make their first sale.
And of course, I had a bad experience with the first time I dealt with a bud tender with my medical card in 2013. I was trying to, I think the first words I said to him, I said, look, I don't want to smoke it anymore. There's got to be a million different ways to ingest it and get the same kind of buzz, if you will. And I was told to try an edible product and was given bad advice about the amount of that edible product. And like so many others out there who have tried edible for the first time, perhaps too much that first. You can certainly bite off more than you should be chewing. And therein lies the old, you start low and you go slow, like 2.5 milligrams as an entry level dose. And I believe my first dose was 33 milligrams.
Oh.
But I woke up at 4 a.m. The room was spinning. I lived to tell the story. It's kind of my philosophy of life anyway. I don't ever want to have 33 milligrams of an edible again, nor have I. But you hear some of these stories a lot from people, and I'm going out on a limb thinking you too have had a few.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've experienced that myself. I also had a friend who went into a dispensary here in Oregon, and this was just a year ago. So at this point, I mean, comparatively, we're a relatively mature market. And he was actually looking for something for his dad, who doesn't consume a lot of cannabis, but was in a lot of pain, just looking for some pain relief, again, in an edible form. And the bud tender was like, oh, here, take this chocolate bar, have him eat the whole chocolate bar, which is 50 milligrams of THC. He'll be so high, he won't even feel anymore. And luckily, I mean, my friend knows me, knows what I do, hears me talk about this all the time, and was like, actually, I had to school the bud tender and be like, no, give me something with a little bit of CBD in there. We're talking about a starting dose of 5 milligrams of THC, like really take the bud tender through that educational experience. But to me, what's scary is that for people who don't know what they're doing, they're putting their full trust into this person. And while cannabis does not yet have a defined lethal dose, so it can't kill you, it still is a highly uncomfortable experience. And as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, I mean, in order to increase the rate at which the consumer market is adopting cannabis, we need to make sure that people who are interested are having at least not a bad experience right off the bat.
Right.
Because people who do have that scary experience, often what happens is they say, oh, no, not for me, not for me.
I don't want to go through that again. That's for sure.
Exactly. Whereas like really it could have been for you if you were given proper guidance and instruction on how to microdose and safely and effectively experiment with this plant until you find out what works for you.
Right. And that is so important. You know, one of the things that is lost in the translation throughout this whole thing is it's truly plant medicine. You know, sure, there's some fun to it. There's definitely adult use recreation that gets involved with this. Okay. Everything in small doses is important. We preach responsible use of cannabis and to educate yourself about this medicine, because we are all our own doctors and we're self-medicating with this plant. And, you know, what works for me may not work for you, and especially in the doses that I might take versus you. And that could have a lot to do with your experience with the plant. It could also have a lot to do with metabolism. And also, are you awakening your endocannabinoid system for the very first time? And therein lies another challenge to people, because they'll try it, nothing happened, I don't get it. So an hour later, 2 hours later, I'm going to take it again. Next thing I know, the room's spinning again. So how obviously education, to me, drives the bus here. All of us who are in this industry have an obligation to the public to educate the public. You agree?
I could not agree more. And I think that it really has to start with this shift from the allopathic model, meaning the Western medicine approach of you take a pill, you take a standardized dose of that pill, you will get a subset of effects, whether they be positive or negative, but they're predictable. And we need to move it into a more nutraceutical approach where botanical medicine lives, where there is no standardized dose for people, where 4 milligrams of THC could give me the same effect that 40 milligrams of THC could give somebody else. And so it's important, again, to really ground in the reality of it's going to take a little bit of experimentation to find what works for you. But our job as industry professionals and guides is to make sure that we are mitigating any of the uncomfortable side effects by adopting and encouraging strategies such as microdosing, keeping a consumption journal, making sure that people feel really safe and empowered to experiment with themselves in a way that's not going to hurt them.
A consumption journal. That's a great term. I'm going to remember that. In fact, I actually think I read something recently that there's either an app in development or it already exists that you can download for free and keep track of your intake and what was in it as far as the combinations. Have you heard of anything like that?
Yes, I know of a couple apps on the market. One of them that comes to mind immediately is Relief. And of course, the leaf is spelled like leaf on a plant, where you are able to track the time of day, the way that you're consuming, what compounds are in that product, how much you consumed. And for me, it's also really important to take note of kind of set and setting. So how much water did you drink? Did you get in a fight with your partner? Are you really stressed out? I mean, what's going on with you apart from what you're consuming, as that will have influence on the experience.
And how much alcohol do you have in your system when you partake?
Oh yeah, another big one that will definitely influence the experience.
One of the doctors I interviewed 8 times. 8 times the magnification is pretty much what this doctor of cannabis, Jordan Tischler, he's they call him, what do they call him? He's Harvard educated, undergrad in Harvard Medical, Preparation H, that's what they call themselves. And he is the one who came out with the 8 times of a catalyst. And I'll be perfectly honest, again, if you are taking an edible and then you go out and drink on top of that, you are playing with your brain in many ways, right?
Oh, absolutely. I definitely do not encourage the combining of the substances. I mean, being crossfaded, as we call it, is an intense experience that often ends in a spinning head and you in front of a toilet bowl.
That's right. And Lord knows, I'm human. I'll admit, it's not something I ever want to do again. I'll be honest. I try to avoid that. And let's talk about that experience just for a second, because I love getting advice from people, educated people like yourself, scientists, educators. Okay, you know you've had too much. There's all sorts of what they call, different anecdotes, different ways to control that. What do you recommend? And please tell me it's not chomping down on black peppercorns.
No, it is not. Though I do understand where that kind of urban legend came in to play. And I do think it's fun, but not my go-to, I'll have to say. I think that, first and foremost, water. Drink as much water as you can and make sure that you are in a place where you feel safe and you're with people that you trust. I think that, again, the set and setting aspect is really important. Then to kind of bring you down, there are products on the market right now specifically designed for this. Undo is an example of a capsule that you can take and it undoes your high. There is also CBD, which is available, and that will help to really bring down the intoxicating effects of THC. Now, I will say that it is important to note that CBD is most effective in doing that when you have consumed THC in a relatively low dose. So if you took, 200 milligrams of THC, then it may not help at that point, But if you consumed maybe 10 milligrams of THC and had some alcohol on top of that and are just feeling really kind of out of your mind, then consuming some CBD may help to bring you back down a little bit, help to mitigate the more uncomfortable side effects like anxiety, paranoia, elevated heart rate, etc.
So if you have a bottle in the cupboard that has 270 milligrams of CBD, straight CBD in an oil dropper, like I have, do you take the whole dropper? Do you chug the whole bottle? How do you know how much CBD to counter the high you've gotten from your THC?
It's hard. It's not an exact science. And like we've been saying, every body has a different body, right? Everybody's unique, and so everybody will respond differently, and it will also depend on how much THC you've taken initially. I'll say that the most important thing if you have CBD oil is to make sure that you keep it under your tongue for as long as possible. So that will allow it to go directly into the bloodstream, and it'll activate a lot quicker rather than having to go through your digestive system and through your liver. That'll just take a little bit longer. And by the time it reaches your system, you may have already kind of calmed down. So I'd start with, 10 to 15 milligrams of CBD under the tongue for as long as possible, and see how that makes you feel.
There you go. And I think that's actually great advice. And I just wonder, any of our first responders out there, because Lord knows this happens. I remember reading in Colorado when they first opened up their market to adult use, and they talked about the emergency room visits are up because of people's, inexperience, and they're taking too much and all this neat stuff. And I wonder, are they using straight CBD in ambulances, in first responders, in emergency rooms? Have you heard of that use? Is there any kind of a practicum out there?
I haven't heard of that use. And in fact, I really don't know if it's happening. If it is, I'll be surprised. The only place that I know of that they at least allow, or they are amenable to the use of CBD oil, is in hospice care. So end of life, palliative care. That seems to be the kind of section of more Western medical approach that will allow that kind of CBD oil. Even in some places will allow THC cannabis, just to help increase the quality of life for that end of life experience.
There you go. It probably beats morphine, I'm just saying, although.
Exactly.
I'll never forget when I had my emergency back surgery, having that morphine drip in that little plunger thing, that little button. That was pretty cool. Of course, they limit the amount you can touch that button, let's just say, but that was another story for another day. I want to ask you about plant-based diets. How familiar are you with them? Do you see the superiority of them? A lot of people are moving towards that. And with the plant-based diet comes this plant along, for fun or medicine. What's your feeling about a plant-based diet? Is it superior to the meat and potatoes that a lot of us live off?
So I am familiar with the plant-based diet. I don't practice it myself, but I do believe that food is medicine. And I also believe that medicinal plants do hold a lot of value in our medicine cabinet as preventatives. I will say that, again, coming back to this idea that every single body is unique, right? So I can't really tell you what's going to be best for your body. And I think that we also need to open up the conversation to really look at the societal implications, such as food deserts and the communities that maybe don't have access to fresh produce, and what that looks like for people. I think that it can do more harm than good for people's mental and emotional health to say, hey, you should be on a plant-based diet for your physical health. And if you're not, that's actually really bad for you, and it's really bad for the planet. Well, if somebody lives in a rural community where they don't have access to fresh produce, maybe their closest grocery store is a gas station that's 30 miles down the road, it would be a significant financial and mental and emotional impact for them to have to travel to try to find that produce. It just may not be feasible for them, right? So I think that anytime we talk about diet, anytime we talk about what people put in their body, we always need to examine where they're at in life and what's feasible for them. I have seen the research and the scientific evidence around moving towards a more plant-based diet. So still consuming maybe some dairy, some meat, some fish, and seeing how that has long-term positive effects on health. However, I just don't think that we can tell people what to do in that regard without really addressing the more community based initiatives that would need to occur for that to happen.
Hey, one last question before I let you give a little plug for your course and how people can find you. In Oregon, it's a mature market. It's been around for a few years. Are you finding that your politicians and your representatives are more well-versed now on cannabis And have you ever been asked by a legislative body to come in and perhaps educate them on it?
So I wouldn't say that they're more well-versed in cannabis science per se, but they do love the program. I mean, it's making the state a lot of money, and with politicians, I mean, no matter what side of the aisle, money talks, right? And so in May alone, I believe that Oregon made over $100 million in just 1 month from just cannabis. And so that is huge. So we've seen a lot of support for the cannabis program from our politicians because of that economic advantage. I'd still say that most legislators are grossly undereducated around cannabis. And my goal in what I do is to push at least enough consumer education and industry education so that we can lobby for better regulation and legislation from the top down in regards to requiring training and education for our industry to be able to allow it to just ethically evolve.
That's it. And how do people find you?
So please find me at my website. My company is Eminent Consulting. The website is eminentconsultingfirm.com. And from there, you can read more about me, our services, as well as see a big, nice button to our online courses.
There you go. All right, Emma Chasen from Portland, Oregon. Again, thank you so much for chit-chatting with me. It's been a pleasure to talk more about this with you. I'd love talking education with anyone. And you obviously have your hands pretty well set on what you like to teach, how you teach, and backing it up with science. And that's terrific. I wish you the best of luck in the future.
Well, thanks so much, Jimmy. It was amazing to be on here and chat with you. The pleasure was all mine.
All right. So for Emma Chasen, I'm Jimmy Young from In the Weeds. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Weed Talk Now, Weed Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge, and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. And this week, I am going to get educated. I am going to get educated by 2 guys from New York and New Jersey who are all about seeds. Now, I had no idea what a market was and available for seeds. We've got Manny Martinez and Victor Quinones from World Trade Genetics with us. Guys, is that a fancy name for being farmers? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, we just wanted to keep some of the cultural characteristics of it, so we ran with the world trade. But we realistically look at it as a trademark. We're like the world trademark.
I get you. I understand that. Can you explain a little bit how you got into the seed business? And obviously, the first question is, I didn't even know that this was like a legal business, but it's pretty legal at this point, right?
Yeah, with recreational opening up in various states, it's becoming illegal, legal everywhere. It is a gray area though still, because seeds are still being delivered to people in other states, but it's generally legal now. As a souvenir collectible, it's legal across the United States.
There you go. And it's all about putting these seeds, taking these seeds from the packets and then turning them into these flowery, beautiful cannabis sativa plants.
Only in legal states.
Only in legal states, where you are in Massachusetts, correct?
Correct.
Right, and you're on the western part of Massachusetts, which is, of course, closer to New Jersey and New York, so it makes for a relatively easy visit, as it were. In Massachusetts, the laws state that adults in a dwelling that has two adults, you can actually grow 12 plants. And of course, the question always is, okay, where do you get those seeds? And the answer is you guys, pretty much, right?
Correct. Well, you can get the seeds from everywhere. There's a lot of varying sources online. Everybody has their own brand behind their genetics. We ourselves, we started this from just our medical needs. I was suffering from seizures and whatnot. So I dove into sativas, and I collected my original genetics overseas from Europe. And, you know, that was about 20 years ago, and just breeding and playing with those ever since.
That to me, the fact that there's a European market, there's an international market. I don't know if you guys got to see the Growin' Belushi series on the Discovery Channel. I really recommend it, because Jim Belushi is a farmer from Oregon, and he talks about the Captain Jack seeds. Now, have you guys heard of the Captain Jack seeds?
Yeah, I've seen a couple of his genetics, yeah.
So I guess Captain Jack was the provider of cannabis for the original Saturday Night Live show, including Jim Belushi's late older brother, John. And Captain Jack is a character in the 3 series. He put together 3 episodes, basically, and they ran on Discovery, and I'm a big fan of Jim Belushi anyway. But you guys, because you're in the seed world, you definitely want to watch this show. I know you'll enjoy it. I know you'll get a laugh, because if you guys think I'm funny and I make you laugh, Jim Belushi is at a whole other level. You can understand that, right?
No, yeah, definitely. That Captain Jack stuff from New York, that, and from what I know, because, you know, history and everybody's different, but I believe that was a Hawaiian skunk. Those were the genetics that were around at that time. Could be wrong about that, but from everything that I've heard, that's what primarily they had.
Hawaiian skunk. Well, whatever works. It was a very exclusive thing, and it's a really funny. The first episode is all about the Captain Jack and what Jim Belushi did to it. Let's just say by leaving the lights on one night. Oops. Anyway, I do want to go back. What are some of the more popular strains that you guys have? And again, take me through the sativas and the indicas, because everybody has an idea that the sativa is the focus and the uplifting one, and the indica is the light, relaxing, kind of couch-like existence. Is that accurate?
To some extent, yeah. Like, I deal primarily with R&D for sativas for World Trade Genetics. So, you know, most of the things I'm dealing with are very euphoric, very mind-blowing. Vic takes care of the indicas. To me, personally, there's a cultural attachment to sativas. I'm, you know, born and raised in New York, and city that never sleeps. You know, there's a lot of energy out there. So, you know, it kind of, to me, when I play with these genetics, it kind of just brings me back to know when I first got into cannabis, and it's more of a cultural thing for me with the sativas. Vic deals with all the indicas. He can tell you about all the indicas.
About the indicas, you know, more body sedative, you know, attributes, you know, body relaxing, you know, but we deal with a lot of hybrids. You know, I'll take my best, you know, indica. They happen to have more terpenes usually than a sativa variety. And we'll just collab like that. I'll shoot them over to him. He'll pollinate it with sativa. We'll try to get more of an uplifting effect, you know, but keep the flavor, you know, stuff like that we do.
Yeah, primarily what happens with me is I get these plants that are 20 weeks, 22 weeks, 18 weeks, 16 weeks, because they're really, really potent landrace sativas that I'm dealing with. And in this whole game, we have a bunch of hybridized plants, but there are these base root genetics, these land races that are still out there, hard to come by. But as a building block, we try to go with these land races because
reintroduce them, and because kind of the market kind of cornered the genetics, you know, in the U.S. Basically, with all, you know, everything's a cookie or OG, you know, so we're trying to bring the building blocks, reintroduce them into the genetics, and
getting some amazing results. Yeah. One of those creations we have here, we package our seeds in these nice collectible cans, is our New York State of Mind. That's what I would like to call a New York land race because it's a haze. But it's an older strand that everybody's familiar with, and we crossed that with a modern strand, the Do-si-dos. So what that did was create a nice combination, gave it a lot of body, a lot of character, modern character. Because all of these old genetics that I primarily deal with, they don't have bag appeal. They don't have the look that, the average nowadays, kind of sort of would be like, oh, that's what I want. Da, da, da.
Yeah, some people, the Reggie and whatnot of the game, but a real connoisseur knows. They know.
I start from the bottom and try to build back up, pretty much.
Okay, because I'm going to actually ask you about how do you go about creating the seed, and then you can dictate, the terpenes, which kind of steer which way these chemicals are going to take you. But how do you start with? Where do you get to the point where you have an original seed and an original strain?
So, in my opinion, everybody's got their genetics from somebody else, so an originality behind a strain pretty much is you taking claim for everybody else's work behind you and just adding your piece to it. Yeah. So, how do I choose? Before we had lab testing, it was more of a visual. I was using my 5 senses. I'm looking, smelling the plant. And I was like, oh, this smells like an amazing blueberry. And he would have something that smelled like an amazing blueberry as well. So the idea behind that is we'll smack them two together and we'll have an even stronger blueberry. And we got varying results. We would have results like that and other results where, the blueberry completely changed on us. And it was a guess and check for a while. But as, the industry progressed and lab testing came more readily available, we started to get full profiles. So now we were looking at profiles of cannabinoids and combining those in our testing and just constantly getting a feel for it because, we came from the grassroots. We didn't have any schooling or anything on this. We were just doing this pretty much for our own selves, our medical reasons or whatnot.
Right. Well, it's experiential learning. I mean, even partaking in the cannabis plant, every individual is different. Everybody's endocannabinoid system is different. Everybody's metabolism is different. And when you start to partake, you really are self-medicating yourself and seeing which strain is going to be working best for your particular let's call them body challenges. Is that accurate? Body challenges, maybe mind challenges, whatever it is. But that to me is the most fascinating thing, that you can literally dictate the DNA of the plant through the genetic makeup of the seed. Correct?
Correct. Yeah.
But are you guys in a lab? Or are you in the garden? Where do you get? Where's your office?
We're in the garden.
We're getting our results back from the lab, and we compare it like that. But
we're in a garden.
Yeah, we're in the garden.
I mean, you have to imagine that pollination of plants has been happening since a plant was conceived by this planet.
Yeah.
So there are super advanced labs where pollen is being chucked, but what I mean. If you look at all of these, historical legendary strands, it's just some guy in a garden, man.
Wait, is that Chance the Gardener? I don't know if you guys ever saw that movie.
Every day, we're getting more advanced every day, though.
But
all right.
The game is actually moving to a way more advanced state right now. We're getting into, actual sequencing of genomes and DNA, actually finding out what every, genetic compound of that plant is and looking at it on a data sheet and being able to actually pick which pieces we want and then replace them into a genome and insert that into a seed. So that's how advanced the industry actually is. But, at a level where we are, we're just breeders. We've been doing it for a long time,
Well, and again, this is one of those things that the OG in this conversation, not the original gangster, the old guy, okay? You have to enlighten me a little bit about the fact that I couldn't tell a male plant from a female plant, although now I'm getting a little bit more knowledgeable, and I understand it's the female plant is the flowering plant.
Correct.
Yes, right?
Correct.
And you only want to deal with females, right? Although you need the male to help out here. What's the role of the male in this is really what I want to know.
For me, I get excited for a really, really strong male more than I would than some flower, because I know the capabilities of that male. I know the lineage behind it. I know what it's going to carry over into my next work.
Absolutely.
So some of these males, you get to the thing about males, or what I've noticed, is that you'll have a male pouring terps out of it. And you're like, my God, this is going to be the best flower ever. And then it starts shooting all these male pollen sacs everywhere. And you're like, oh, it's a male. But then it's like, oh, it's a male, because you can take that same trait and hopefully pass it on. You know what I mean? And there are things that, and usually what I've noticed, there are the complete plants, the full body, the full structure, the look, the terp, the effects, everything like that. It's hard to find those. It's hard to create those perfect things. So there's always something lacking, something, a little piece of something that you can add to it. So we're always just breeding, always just grabbing all of our creations, others' creations, and breeding and pheno hunting. The testers, thank you so much to the testers. They rip through most of our work and give us good feedback. Yeah, we couldn't do it without the testers.
Well, that's another reason why labs are a great investment out there, because no matter how long this industry survives, and now that it's launched, I'm guessing it's going to survive as long as the plant's been around, which is thousands of years. That's a good place to take a look for your investment. And I know all the labs are overwhelmed, not just with the dispensary work, but also a lot of the home grows, a lot of micro grows, like micro brews. They have these micro strands, right, guys? I mean, I'm starting to hear more and more about that. How do you guys come up with the names?
Oh my God. So we usually sit back with tester plants after they're done, and we indulge in them. And
I get it.
You get about 4 or 5 guys just yelling out a bunch of crazy stuff, and whatever one pretty much laughs the most, or I don't know, has the most effect, we run with. But it's pretty much to the strain. You know, if we're indulging something and it's got a butter taste to it, then it's going to have some type of butter themed name, just so that the customers can know what they're dealing with.
There you go. I get that. Do you think there'll ever be a forever young strain? That's one of the things we've talked about off recording here. Is there? How would I figure out a way to get that forever young or youngy strain?
At New York, we need that daytime sativa, that Jimmy Young OG or something, whatever it's going to be. We didn't make it yet. We got to talk about it.
There's quite a few famous Jimmy Youngs, I might add, and I'm not one of them.
We gotta figure that out.
No, he's no longer with us, but a long time in the UK, there was a disc jockey back in the day when there was actually disc to jockey. He was a talk show host in England, and he used to have a call-in show. People used to call in their recipes, and it was Sir Jimmy Young, I swear. Okay, he's no longer with us. And of course, there was a boxer who fought one of my heroes, Muhammad Ali, in 1978, I think the fight was. And can you imagine, I was having really mental challenges there. Do I root for my namesake against my idol, or do I root for my idol to kick my namesake's butt? You know what I'm saying. But anyway,
they'll know. Jimmy Young, Emmy Award winning Jimmy Young, they'll know.
Yeah.
They'll know.
No, they won't. But we can keep that between us. Hey, how do you set the market? How do you know that the seeds that you're creating are going to make you, I'm guessing your margins, biggest margins you can? How do you earn a reputation, I guess, for your seeds? Is that how you do it?
From what we've noticed so far, we've been trying to figure that out ourselves for a while. Like, how do you dictate the price of the seed? How do you get the seed into the hands of the public? How do you, get that following that every brand or company wants? So, primarily our goal was to get the seeds out to everyone. We were tired of getting bad genetics ourselves. We would, pay for packs or come across seeds. Horrible. It's an investment. You got to understand, when you get that seed and you put it in dirt, that's a 3-month investment. You know what I mean? So you're investing 3 months of your time. You want something that is quality. So our ultimate goal is to get quality genetics out to everybody at an affordable price. Now, in that speaking, like this strain, the New York State of Mind that we were talking about earlier, if you were to put a price on the mother in that plant, I don't know how you would do that. Like, and
we haven't let it out the house yet
because I don't understand. It's hard to dictate the value of genetics.
If nostalgic value to it.
Yeah, the nostalgic value. There's also the fact that, there might only be 1 or 2 of them out there in the world.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? So it's really hard to figure this whole thing out, especially when your ultimate goal is just getting it to people.
So is it the reputation that will drive the price of the seed more than anything else?
Yeah, so we came to the conclusion that once these people get our genetics in their hand, we'll develop that reputation. So our testers, we give out so many genetics you'd have no idea. Like, we just hand them out to any grower. And when we get that feedback from them, it has created that repertoire. Oh, they have quality things. We know them personally. Oh, they have great genetics.
It's authentic. It's not just like,
it's weird.
The biggest hype on the market.
Yeah. That's how we kind of want our approach to be. It'd be kind of like if you can go buy your can of Coca-Cola from the owner.
I get that. I totally get that. So give me a ballpark, okay? I'm shopping for seeds. I go to World Trade Genetics. I find your site. I've been to your site. I think it's kind of cool with all the different reviews and the rankings, and you can kind of, what kind of a seed are you looking for? What kind of experience? How do you set the price? I mean, how much is it going to cost me to get 10 seeds? Let's cut to the chase. If I was looking for 10 seeds, can I get a bag of 10 seeds off your site?
Well, off of our site is just information based. There are other seed vendors that carry our seeds.
So there'll be a list of vendors.
Yeah, there's a list of vendors. We make it acceptable to everybody. We try to introduce it at a price where everybody can afford it and get a chance to run the genetics. There are genetics out there for thousands of dollars. We let our seeds go for about $80, $90. And
per seed. Wait, hang on. Is that per seed?
No, that's for 10 seeds.
10 seeds for $80.
Yes.
And you can put them in the dirt, and it can make you pounds. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, when you buy a seed, you have it forever.
Right.
If you find something in that seed that you like, you just keep it in rotation through cloning. So technically, your investment is lifelong.
Wow. Well, that is very reasonable. That's awesome. Now I get the seed in the dirt thing, and I get the water, and I avoid that at all costs because I don't want. That's a lot of pressure on me to farm and see the flowers. I'm barely keeping my deck plants alive right now. We're going into the cold weather. I'm eyeing the first frost, all that stuff. So I'm fearful of you get the seeds, you put them in, and then nothing happens. Okay, and I know that's always a chance, right? So walk me through the process, please, because I understand. I once saw this, seeds go in between wet paper towels. And you guys are going to tell me that it's not just any generic paper towel. You do have a brand that you use, right?
Yeah, we live or die by the bounty. I mean...
The quicker picker-upper. I love that.
I mean, honestly,
stay away from the store brand.
Yeah, the store brands, the other brands. There's obviously something else in them that is just killing.
Turn to mush.
Every seeds, they turn to mush. The only brand that we use or find that works every single time is Bounty. I'm not even a spokesman. I'm just telling you, honestly.
You're not an actor. You don't even play it on TV. You're just a satisfied consumer, and you see the difference, right?
Yeah, there's definitely other chemicals or components in all those other brands, because there have been times where Bounty has been sold out, and we have ran through
Corona,
everything,
serious.
Nothing has worked.
COVID-19 has been rough.
I was going to ask you guys, obviously, it's been rough on just about every industry. And how has it affected yours?
I mean, honestly, we didn't see any reflections and overall numbers of anything. We really saw a lot of people that found the seed and the genetics and the work that they were doing as comfort in this kind of time of you can't do anything else. We got a lot of people writing back to us yo, thanks so much for giving me these genetics, because over this COVID and everything that's happening, I've been living with these guys. I've been working on these guys every day. And, it just hits you in a different way when you realize in the time of nothing to do, we gave somebody something to do.
Yeah, I get it. Do they talk to their plants?
I think everybody may. Probably curse them out.
Oh, God. You guys are absolutely awesome. I've learned quite a bit, and I really appreciate that because I am fascinated by this industry. I love meeting new people that have new ideas. And I've talked to some scientists, right? The people at the director of science at a various lab, and they're the smartest people I've ever talked to in my life. Now, you guys know your stuff too. I just want to throw it out there. You don't need a PhD after your name to understand how to grow weed or use in genetics, right, guys?
Thank you. Yeah, definitely.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, you can put a couple of names after, put a couple of letters after your names, like, THC master, CBD master, CBN, mix master, whatever you want to call it. But I just think it's great what you guys are doing. And is there a place, do you have images or video of your lab or what you're doing, or do you keep all that stuff secret?
You can find everything on Instagram that we show publicly. Our Instagram account, World Trade Genetics on Instagram. You can also find us on seedfinder.eu.
That's how I found you, just for the record, okay? Not that I was looking.
On, blackstoneseeds.com. Or just type in World Trade Genetics, on Google, it pops up.
It comes right up, and God knows Google knows everything. We understand. But does Google know how to grow weed, or they have to act? It's only there to find the path, right, guys?
Correct.
All right. Well, I got to tell you, Manny Martinez and Victor Quinones, I really enjoyed chatting with you on In the Weeds this week. Thank you so much for taking the time out. You did a great job, guys. Okay, let's do this again. But for Victor and Manny, and one day we will see a Forever Jimmy Young strain out there somewhere on the open market. There you go. Hey, remember, guys, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Talk to you next time on In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. We Talk Now, We Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.